Good afternoon. Can you hear me out there? Good afternoon. Welcome this afternoon, beautiful sunny afternoon, to an Oak Harbor City Council workshop. Today is July 26th. It is 2 p.m. We have these workshop meetings on the fourth Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and that's what it is today, the fourth Wednesday of July. So good afternoon. I'd like to call this City Council workshop to order. This will be both a physical meeting and a virtual meeting. Some members of staff may be participating via teleconference, and I believe one of our city councilors is also today. Councilmember Marshall has let us know that he will not be in attendance today, and Mayor Pro Tem Heisen has let us know that she will not be here today. So with that, I think we do have the rest of our city council. And why don't you introduce yourselves, starting with Mr. Hoffmeyer.
Oak Harbor City Council Member Shane Hoffmeyer.
I feel like I'm supposed to come up with a fun fact or something like that. Brian Stuckey? Here?
Are you you're city council, right?
I am city council.
So
yes.
I am Bob Severance, mayor.
Beth Munn, City Council, and also President of Help House.
Chris Wittgenstein, City Council.
Okay, today's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube. Hello out there, YouTube, Facebook. And it's also available for viewing after the meeting on cable channel 10, HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although the council may allow or request public participation. We do have 2 action items on our agenda today. So let's get started with our first presentation today. Falls under community partner presentations. And we have with us the WHIDBEY CAMANO Island Tourism, Sherry WYATT, Public Relations and Marketing Consultant. Welcome, Sherry. Nice to see you back.
Hi, I'm not Sherry. I'm Jackie Henderson. I'm on the Coopville Council and am the chair of the WHIDBEY CAMANO Island Tourism Group. And I just wanted to give you just a 30-second background on this group. It was established in the year 2000, as an interlocal agreement between Island County, the City of Oak Harbor, the Town of Coopville, and the City of Langley. We have an 18-member board. It's made up of 4 electeds, one from each of those entities. And we have 7 members of tourism groups, such as the chambers, and then 7 members from different lodging establishments. And so I just wanted to give you that just brief history of the group, that it was established by an interlocal agreement. And then I'll turn it over to Sherry WYATT.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was here not that long ago, and we talked a lot about what we're doing with regenerative tourism. And you notice we've changed our name since then. So it's now called Embrace WHIDBEY and CAMANO Islands. And I'm really excited to share with you just a few things we've been up to, and then also tell a little bit more about the regenerative piece. And of course, we'll answer any questions that you have. So we collect a lot of data. One of the things we spend our budget on is data. Data is really valuable when you're determining how to market and who to market to. And you'll notice from this slide that from the Dean Runyon report, tourism is pretty important to Oak Harbor. In fact, 44% of visitor spending in Island County is spent here. Total visitor spending overall was $301 million. So you're a big player in this arena. You are important to tourism. You're important to us. We like you as a partner. One thing I did see that you should know, the other side of that coin is that the funding provided by Oak Harbor to that program is pretty small in relatively considering what else is being funded through unincorporated, through Coopville at Langley. They're giving 2%, and you went to a flat 20,000 in the year 2010 and have stayed at 20,000. And Langley is also at 1% and not 2% for some projects that they were doing. Just wanted you to see that. It sort of shows the dramatic notice there. So other kinds of data that we gather is short-term rental data. This is really interesting. This is an Oak Harbor zip code. So this isn't just the city of Oak Harbor, but lodgings, boy, it's really growing. And we have 183 properties, and that is in the zip code 98277. We have new data just coming, maybe even by the end of this day, that will help us break that down even further to show specifically what's happening in the city of Oak Harbor in lodgings for short-term rentals, because it's a big growing area and something to watch. This is another slide that you probably already had a chance to kind of study and look at and see where Oak Harbor sits in comparison to other communities around the county. And, it's pretty significant. You are definitely generating a lot of funding through short-term rentals, as well as traditional lodging. Wanted to share again this slide. This is a pretty big number. Our website is massive. We have over 400,000 users on an annual basis, generating $11.71 million in total economic impact. That is derived by a study done by Destination Internationals, and it's several years of study. It wasn't designed by a marketing person like me. It's designed by someone who is in the business of analyzing data. So that's a powerful tool that we use, and we get everyone's word out, and everyone comes to that site. One of the reasons it's so popular is we have a book direct platform on that, and that was something lodgings asked us to do, traditional and short-term rentals, to allow people to go to our site and find what's available, and then book directly through us. They go right to the lodgings, and that's not something any other website in the county can do. That's not something that is affordable by smaller entities. It's something we do, and we do it with our budget to make sure we can track, and then we also grow. So you'll see, wow, it was like 30,000, where is that number up there? Yeah, so $30,143. It's up so much, and it continues to grow. This is just these year's numbers. So the ROI on that is really high, and ROI seems to be something everyone wants to find out about. What's the return on the investment? So that one, yeah. So just if you've gone to our website, I hope that you will, you'll notice that we have a lot of Oak Harbor content. Oak Harbor is important to us. You're the big city. I mean, you are definitely a big part of our story. We have a piece called Jets on WHIDBEY, where for visitors, we allow them to see when they're flying, when they're training, so they can plan their trip around that and know. Some people want to plan their trip to go see them. Sometimes people prefer to have a different setting. So we have also information about the Pacific Northwest Naval Air Museum, the arts community, everything in Oak Harbor is there, all the restaurants. We went through a lot of time and effort to load everybody in there. And all the events, of course, as I mentioned. One thing interesting is we have a newsletter that goes out every month to 30,000 people, and in July we featured the Garry Oak Society, and Garry Oak trees are really a massive treasure, we think, for this community and for the whole county. So we did a story about them. We have a lot of information about Garry Oak trees on there, and in the 24 Trails Guide, which you might remember, we did have Windjammer Park in there. We had Garry Oak trees, we included everybody. But we were trying to make these really accessible trails, so sometimes people might not think Windjammer as a trail, but it's a fantastic one. And then the Garry Oak ones that gives you the guided tour around the city. Another thing about the Trails Guide I just wanted to share, we just did a campaign with something called Datify in February of 2023. It was an advertising campaign which we spent $5,000 that targeted outdoor enthusiasts. The campaign ran for 2 months using banner ads on people's phones who were within 400 miles of WHIDBEY and CAMANO Islands. And year to date, this is on July 17th, we have already seen 1,073 trips from that, with an estimated campaign impact of $227,000 and $403. So it's the big ROI on that campaign. So we just launched another campaign with Datify for $10,000 targeting Phoenix, and it was even before it got so hot. So we were on the right track, and it's like, keep it real, keep it cool. And it's an animated graphic, and it's really doing well. We're really excited to give you the results of those. Quickly moving on, earned media is something we spend a lot of time on. We, of course, do traditional advertising, but this kind of storytelling through a third-party endorsement, really, it comes from someone who's an influencer or a reporter or a travel writer. We do a lot of that and focus, of course, and include Oak Harbor in those stories. And recently, we had the opportunity to work with Studio 13 Live, and we brought, Margaret Livermore and the Oak Harbor Main Street Association and Catherine Munez from the Tipsy Jellyfish Wine Bar, and they talked about the event coming up in March, the Wine Bites and Brews event. So it was great to have them on television, and those are opportunities that we provide to Oak Harbor businesses when we can. Another example of great earned media, this is a huge one. This is, they have like 14 million in their database. And Oak Harbor was featured only in your state, and it featured several different businesses, the drive-in, the barbecue, and it talked about Oak Harbor being one of the best-kept secrets as a coastal community worth visiting. And as you're familiar with the last presentation, this is our new focus, is really to step back for a minute and think about what matters most to residents. We got a lot of, I don't want to say complaints, but we did a survey of 700 people throughout the county, and we learned what they were thinking about tourism, what they wanted to see. And we're making adjustments. We're shifting to where residents are first to preserve and improve the islands. Guests are next. We want to create richer visitor experiences where there's community interaction with those visitors in some capacity so that they're contributing back to this place. So it harnesses tourism to be a force for good. A lot of work going on. You have before you this new regenerative guide. You did get the Dean Runyon report last time. I brought extras if you need it. This is our new proposal that we're working on called Embrace. We had 2 in-person workshops last month, and prior to that, we had 2 virtual workshops. We had hundreds of people participate in those, and they're now creating projects that are going on our website, and we're looking at how to integrate all of the components that tourism's impact is onto our county. It's cutting edge, it's hard work, and we're excited about it. I wanted to read the manifesto really quickly before I close, just so you're aware of where we're coming from with this. Together, we are bridge builders. We aspire to connect and foster a sense of belonging while honoring the uniqueness of our inhabitants and our communities. We celebrate our shared identity. We share the sense of place, hoping you bring your whole self to us as you engage with our community and awe-inspiring natural environment. As stewards of these islands, we strive to honor our interconnections and restore balance and mutual respect among all living things. Honoring those who came before us, we are creating a home for generations to come. We offer our whole selves to you, and we part better, stronger, and more resilient because of our time together. That's not normal tourism marketing talk. So we're shifting to reach out to a different visitor, a visitor that can relate to this and care about a place. And it's working. We're excited, and it does definitely include Oak Harbor community, and we're seeing people from Oak Harbor respond really positively to this. And there's 4 pillars: healthy nature, access, bridge building, and transformational mindset. So with that, I want to leave you. There's so much more I could say, but I know we have a time limit, and you have questions, so I wanted to be sure we had time for Jackie and I to respond to questions and to help hear what the city has to say, and we're here to help. We just are really eager to keep you as a partner. We'd like to see you back at a partnership level that makes sense, that's really in line with the rest of the other communities and the cities. So that's why we're here today, and thank you for this opportunity. We're happy to talk again. This doesn't have to be the only time we talk about tourism. It's obviously a very big industry for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Stay up here.
We'll turn to the city council for questions or input. Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. You were talking about all the trails. Are you aware that in Windjammer Park, there's a special place through the state park trails system for kayakers to come and to be able to camp? I didn't know if that was in on your thing or not. I just thought I'd mention it.
I appreciate that because we're about to reprint.
Okay?
So the good news is we're collecting any comments that we missed, and it's kayaking as part of the state trail.
Part of the state parks.
Yeah.
And special
Yeah,
little area with an ordinance. Not anybody can camp, but anyway, they make a reservation, and the police
Perfect.
know about it and stuff. But I'll look
Perfect.
back and see if I can find a contact for you.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, and we've had a really good response to this, so we're ready for a reprint. And we have new branding, so it seemed like. Other questions?
Yes, other questions?
Was that the exit
Anyone?
music?
Counselor Stuckey?
Like at the Grammys or something?
I'm looking for the slide here. You did one slide that talked about short-term rental properties. 183 short-term rental properties. I'm assuming that's hotels as well as Airbnb and VRBO, correct?
Actually,
Or is that just Airbnb and VRBO?
yes, it's just Airbnb. And the reason I didn't focus so much on hotels is I know that you're really aware already of what the hotels contribute. But in some cases, some hotel properties put in individual rooms up on those platforms because it's a marketing platform and they can get people to see, oh, there's a room available at this particular lodging. And so they do put them on the Airbnb platform.
Do you happen to know, or can we get access to how many short-term rentals are in the city of Oak Harbor?
Yes, now we have the information to get that.
I would be curious for that. I mean, that's one thing that gets brought up from time to time
Yeah.
is, some people love them. Some people think that it's contributing to the affordable housing issue. I mean,
Right.
I'm not saying it is or isn't. I would just have not been able to ever answer how many. It could be 12. It could be 100. I don't know. So if you give me that data, that would be excellent.
We've just
Thank you.
purchased AirDNA's data, and that's part of what we're going to get. We're breaking it down deeper. to
Excellent.
find out.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Questions? Well, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. I think we also have later in our agenda some discussion about
Yeah.
this, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll move on then to item B on the agenda, which is Oak Harbor Gary Oaks Society, application for Washington Historic Registry, Smith Park, and I think we've got Kyle Renninger. Welcome, Kyle.
Wonderful, thank you. Hello, it's very nice to meet all of you. For those, of course, that I already know, for those that I have not yet met, it's a pleasure. My name is Kyle Renninger. I'm a fifth-generation WHIDBEY Islander, born and raised, and I think we're going to have some fun. This is something that's really fun, that's really true to Oak Harbor. So today, let's talk about Smith Park. So first, I just want to say that good things in our community don't happen in a vacuum, right? And you all know that. And so I just wanted to take a quick second to say we are so grateful for the ongoing partnership that we have with the city of Oak Harbor and how well the city staff step up time and time again, including Gideon, including Brian, and we're just so grateful for them. So I wanted to mention that before we got started. So brief agenda. I'll move through the slides pretty quick because I know we only have 10 minutes, but I want to give you a sense of what the state register is, why we should nominate Smith Park, and what are the benefits to our community. So even though we only have 2 registered properties in our city as of today, our city has a really rich history. The 2 that are registered, so the first one, the Benjamin Lors Mansion. This is sometimes referred to as the house at Cackle Corner. This is at SR 20 and Swantown. This was placed on the National Historic Register in 1977. And fun fact, the nomination was prepared by my great aunt. Her name was Sandy Pease. So that was the first one. The second one was the Neal Barn and Water Tower. That was placed on the Washington Heritage Register in 1992, and then in 2011, it was placed on the State Barn Registry. The registration for the Washington Heritage Register was prepared by Helen Chatfield Weeks, and I think she'd be saying hoorah for Oak Harbor today if she was here. So what is the Washington Heritage Register? So I really briefly want to mention there's 3 different registers, and I want to make sure we differentiate between what those are. The first, I'll start with the first one, which is the National Register of Historic Places. That's administered by the Department of the Interior, National Park Service. That's the one most people think of. When they think of like a historic register, they think the National Register administered by the Park Service. There's actually 2 others that we can consider. The second is the Washington Heritage Register. That's administered at our state level. And then, of course, we have a local Oak Harbor register as well. And so in consultation with the State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, who administers both the national and state level registers for our state, they suggested that we pursue the Washington Heritage Register. So that's why we have brought this forward to you today. So the State Heritage Register's been around since like 1971, and again, administered by the DAHP, Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. This can include many different types of properties, sites, and buildings. They have to be at least 50 years old, and the key here is to have high integrity. What does that mean? Historic integrity. It means that if someone who was alive when that building was first built, or if when that site was kind of first used, if they went back today, would it look mostly the same? Would it still have its integrity that today gives us that historic value? So it's a really key litmus test. Some of the nuts and bolts, right? This is just an honorary designation, and I want to make sure that's really clear, right? I think sometimes when people think about registers, they go, I'm going to lose control of my property, or we won't be able to do things. That's not true. In this case, it's an honorary designation. We're raising the public's awareness. It helps us to get grants, which will be really helpful. The one thing is, SEPA will apply, right? So this is a consultation with the state if the city decides to take an action. However, even though the state consults, the city still retains the decision-making ability. So we don't cede our power, we don't cede our authority to the state. They just work as a helping hand to make sure that we're continuing to promote that historic integrity. The nomination. So first we started with the nomination form. Took many hours. This has probably been we're like year 3 in this now to get it together. So this is not an overnight process, right? The nomination form and the consultation with the state took several years. We just had our city park board review the nomination, and they unanimously approved it being recommended to the council. And so today, now we're at number 3, the city requesting the nomination. The state has requested that as the public owner of the property, that the council give its blessing and request that the state place it on the register. So that's one of the reasons why I'm before you today. After that, so upon your request, then the state will review it and they will schedule it for further review. The professionals on the board will review it, and if they agree, then it will finally be placed on the Heritage Register. So we still have a few more steps to go, but we're about halfway through. And the clicker is not working. Could you just advance it to the next slide for me, please? Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so why should we nominate Smith Park? So we have to go back to the beginning, and the beginning was a long time ago, right? We know that coastal Salish tribes have lived here since time immemorial. And what I really want to hammer home for you today is that these Garry oak trees in our town, and especially some of the biggest ones, it's not an accidental forest, right? This was not created by happenstance. These are anthropomorphic landscapes, right? They were formed by the human hand through the land steward practices of those who came before. We now have these Garry oaks today with those big, huge canopies up top and big round trunks. So I almost like to think that, some of the biggest ones are these kind of like living monuments, right? When you look at those, you think back to what Oak Harbor was like and those who came before us. So then, of course, as we know, starting in the mid-1800s, Native Americans were removed to reservations, and we had settlers come into Oak Harbor. Oak Harbor, the name as we know it today, was coined by Dr. Lansdale for the many Garry oaks that line the bay. And interestingly enough, the park location was used as kind of a town square. If you think about, like East Coast towns that have that kind of charming, small square, everybody gathered together. That's what Smith Park was for our community long before it was even platted out. So eventually the Barringtons came to own the land. We know that the Captain Barrington passed away, and Mrs. Barrington was responsible for providing for her family. She platted the first plat of Oak Harbor. The town of Oak Harbor was platted by Mrs. Barrington. So we can kind of think of her as like our town's founding mother. And she put Smith Park right in the dead center. So as the story goes, she eventually sold her lots to the man we know as Lewis Smith. Lewis Smith made a deal with the townspeople. He said, if you buy enough of these lots, because she had not sold many of them, if you buy enough of these lots, I will give you this park. And so, as it goes, enough townspeople and other people bought enough lots, and Lewis Smith deeded the park to the city in the early 1900s. Incredible, right? Incredible. It was our town's very first asset. When we had nothing to our name, on the auditor's sheet from the state, it showed Smith Park, and I think it was worth $10,000 then. So really briefly, I just want to show you on the left, that's a T-sheet, which was the Coast and Geodetic Survey from the 1888. Smith Park is circled there in red, and you can kind of see those cloud-like shapes. Those are the Garry oak trees, right? Really cool. The one on the right is the first plat of Oak Harbor. That's Christina Barrington's plat. And again, in red is Smith Park. It's in the dead center, right? She put it in the dead center of town. So there's been a lot of research. This is a labor of love. This is a gift. This was 200 plus hours that I personally invested into this nomination, both going to the Historical Society in Coupeville, looking at old photographs and old newspapers. The Garry Oak Society paid to digitize some newspapers at the time. So you can see the Oak Harbor News. We digitized from 1915 to 1917, so right when Oak Harbor first became a town. And I love their tagline. Official newspaper of Puget Sound's paradise. It was so cool to read through those. So we have a lot of great sources that really illustrate and really confirm to us that yes, this park absolutely is historic. So why should we do this, right? What are the benefits? Tell me the benefits. Okay. So first, the ecotourism. From Sherry's presentation, we have a lot of people coming. And this dovetails so beautifully with that regenerative tourism, right? I like to think of Oak Harbor as the emerald jewel in our historic downtown, right? Totally underutilized still for the tourism component. People want to come and see things that are super unique, and no other community on Whidbey Island has anything like what we have with Smith Park. And even in the state, right? There is no other public park that we know of that is a pure stand of Garry oak trees. I think that's really cool. We've included Smith Park in our Garry oak tree walking tour, and it's just yet another reason for visitors, for people to come and visit our historic downtown and see something cool and stay and spend the day and hopefully leave a few coins with our merchants, right? Number 2, community pride. I think that this is so important, right? So often I hear, well, you know, Oak Harbor doesn't have very much historic stuff. It's like, no, we absolutely do. We just need to take a minute to step back and recognize it and nominate it and say, yes, this is special, and we recognize that it's special. So I think a nomination would really be a boost to Oak Harbor pride and really put our stamp on it and say, you know, look at this amazing historic downtown that we have, this emerald jewel right in the middle. And third, and certainly not least, a nomination, a listing on the register unlocks grant funding opportunities for the park, right? This is a whole new pot of money that we can unlock just by approving this nomination. And that could be for things like supporting further interpretation in the park and other activities in the park when the needs arise. So what's the ask? It's pretty simple, and it doesn't cost anything. So our ask is that the Oak Harbor City Council, as the formal owner of the park, request that the state place Smith Park on the Washington State Heritage Register based upon the nomination that we prepared. And that's what I have for you today. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Kyle. I'll turn to the council for questions. Anyone? Councilor Munns?
Not a question, but it's really cool that you were able to digitize the newspaper articles and stuff like that, because that'll help keep it, and possibly we can put some of that on our Facebook page, at least for a little while.
Sure, yeah, and I'd be happy to share. We did that through the University of Washington Libraries. They hold the microfilm, and I first started out, I don't know, you all have probably used those machines before where you unspool it and you thread it through and you start going and it's zipping by, and I was like, okay, we can't do this. So we actually paid to have them sent back to Pennsylvania. They scanned them, but the crucial part here was they did OCR. So if you have a relative, for example, with a specific last name, if you're looking for a specific date or a specific period, you can do a search and actually search by keyword now, which is really cool. Something, that trying to use those scrolly things and the things flying by, something you couldn't even do before. So we've unlocked a new resource through this process as well.
Well, thank you for putting all that effort and time into it. That's definitely appreciated.
You're welcome.
You are an amazing storyteller.
Thank you.
I didn't know if this next 10 minutes was going to be a snooze fest or just interesting, and preferably you had me on the edge of my seat. So I
said we were going to have fun, right?
You didn't lie. You brought it. A great job. Great presentation. I appreciate hearing the history. As someone newer to Oak Harbor, it was fascinating to hear all that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, I mean, echoing some of what Councilor Stuckey said, I seeing you on the agenda here, I went ahead and heeded the doctor's advice and left the Red Bull at home. I know your mom's super proud of you, but the rest of us in here are proud of you as well. And I'm sure this is a fact that isn't lost on you. In these hundreds of hours of research and researching all this history, I think you understand that you're also writing yourself into history a little bit. So I hope that's not lost on you. Thanks for all the good stuff you're doing, and this is incredibly amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would say you too, right? You two are part of this. You are a crucial part of seeing this nomination through. So I think, although I've prepared the nomination, I need your support, and we need your support to get this done, and your council's stamp of approval will be part of this package as well. So you two will be written into the historical record for doing this as well.
So I have to tell a short story. When I was still in the title business, I got a call from a local citizen who was probably part of your society early on, asking about the possibility of changing the name of Smith Park to Oak Park or Gary Oak Park. And we went back and looked at the deed from Mr. Smith that says it needs to be Smith Park forever. And so I thought that was kind of interesting.
That is correct.
Just a little
He wrote in the deed a public park to be named Smith Park.
For the family.
And there was one more piece. Interestingly, in the research, so when Oak Harbor only had one park, so think that, now we have so many beautiful parks. I mean, we are a park city. But when we only had one park, I found references that would just call it the park, right? If you only had one park, it's the park. Or town park. It was also called town park, city park. So it went by multiple different names. And of course now, it's very, very officially, Smith Park. But it's interesting that colloquially, there were so many different names that it was referred to in the newspaper, for example. So many different names that I was doing that keyword search on to find, and up it would pop. Town park, city park, Smith Park.
Thank you, Kyle. Really nice job. Appreciate it. No other questions? Thank you very much. I think we're going now to move to an action item.
All right, thank you.
So we have our Park and Recreation Director, Brian Smith, coming up. Brian,
Afternoon,
I'll just
Council.
turn
Good to
it
be with you today. So, as noted in their presentation, we have a request from the Gary Oak Society to submit this application. We did run it by our Parks and our Park Board, and they unanimously approved and recommended the application. There were a couple of questions early on whether this does have any restrictions or requirements tied to it. I sat down and spoke with some of the staff at the State Historical Registry Office, Matty Levesquez and Michael Hauser, and it does not restrict any use of the property unless state or federal funding for an improvement is used for improvements there at the park. Then under the Executive Order 2102, that would be reviewed. They would look at the project impact on the integrity of the park, depending on what the site was significant for in the application. So there's no requirement, no restrictions in regards of maintenance linked to the nomination, so that alleviated any concerns that we had as far as this application goes. Like Kyle also mentioned, there are federal tax credit programs for properties on the National Register if it moves over to National Register designation after this. There's also local grant projects that are given by the state and helpful considerations of state historical preservation grant programs with this application. So staff defers to council for approval of this, but a potential motion would be to approve the Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society request and authorize the City of Oak Harbor's Director of Parks and Recreation to submit an application for Smith Park to the Washington Historic Registry.
Okay, thank you. So before we go to council, I'll verify with our city clerk that we've gotten no other public input about this.
That's correct, Mayor. We received no other input.
Okay. And then my notes also show that Gideon Kaufman is with us. Did you wish to say a word or two? Okay. Oh, great. Okay. So I'll turn to council. Yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Being that it's an action item, I would certainly be okay with public comment.
Okay, we'll ask the public that is here today if there are any public comments you'd like to make.
Hello, Laura Reniger, President, Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society, and again, a long-term Oak Harborite. I just wanted to reiterate that there was an email sent out by Margaret Livermore, the Executive Director of the Main Street Association, to all of you, dated June 19th. She says, Dear Mayor Severns and Oak Harbor City Council, Oak Harbor Main Street Association would like to offer our support to the Gary Oak Society in their bid to submit an application to add Smith Park to the Washington Historic Registry. Smith Park is such a unique spot, being one of the few Gary Oak groves. Actually, it's the only one in the state. Sincerely, Margaret Livermore. And I'm also going to steal a line from Gideon's recent presentation about historic sites. And I think, just I'm quoting him roughly, but the public is it 60% more likely to visit historic sites than to go to like a professional ball game or something? Is that right? Say again? 8 times. Yeah. So when my husband and I go to a new place, a new city to visit, we're very drawn to historic sites, and that's part of the story of the place we're going to. So I can just imagine this would be the frosting on the cake for Smith Park and our community. So thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else?
Sue Carr-Hollis, and I live here in the city of Oak Harbor. And first, as a disclaimer, I am a member of the Gary Oak Society. But one other thing to add to this, because I believe it takes 50 years to be semi-historical. 1963 and 64, when we first moved here, Smith Park was still the park. And it was the park because most of us were walking from Mailer Point from Officers Cay Park. And when my siblings and I would come to town, and I was a 9th grader and didn't necessarily want to see them for a while, we would set a time and we would meet at the park. And all the bikes were left at the park, and they weren't stolen at that time. But that's where we met, and then we, of course, would go down to Maston's and spend what money we had or any other things. But as a child who moved here because of the Navy, and it was my 18th school district I came to, but again about the 20th, this was an important part of our growing up, and again from walking from Mailer Point out here. And the other aspect of it, I cannot commend more the research that Kyle has done, the advocacy and research his mother, Laura Reniger, have done, and what they have done to keep this organization going, and the many contacts they've made throughout the United States and Canada that I'm aware of. And I so wholeheartedly endorse this and hope that you will follow suit. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr-Hollis. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to council. Yes, Councilor Munns.
I'm guessing there's not much discussion. I'll go ahead and make the motion if it's all right. I move for us to approve the Oak Harbor Gary Oak Society request and authorize the City of Oak Harbor's Director of Park and Recreation to submit an application for Smith Park to the Washington Historic Registry.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and that motion reads like the suggested packet motion. Motion made by Councilor Munn, seconded by Councilor Hoffmeyer. Seeing no other questions or input, all in favor signify by raising your right hand. And we have, I think, Mr. Weiser.
Yes, we do,
Okay.
and his hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser. I see you now. Okay, well, thank you very much, yeah. Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is the Windjammer Park survey results and recommendations. And I think we have, again, our Parks and Rec Director, Brian Smith. And there's a possibility we may hear something from Sabrina. But first, turn it
Yes.
back to Brian.
Yeah, we would like to share with you the results from the Windjammer Park survey that was conducted last year. And we'll actually go ahead and start with Sabrina, our Communications and IT Manager, to give you a little bit of background into, provide some background and information on the survey process and why we conducted it and what came out of that.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, Council. So I hope this clicker works. Yay, okay. So the background for the Windjammer Park feedback, we did create this book that was in your packet. And what this book, I'm just going to kind of walk through some of the background and information for your reference. So this started out as a process because we had done some initial work when the city decided to put the clean water facility at what is now Windjammer Park. And there was a multi-phased approach that was created for how we were going to develop that park over time. So the park opened with some of those phases completed in June 29th of 2019. After a few years of use, some staff changes happened, and we started looking at the park again and the funding, and we realized we should really get back together and talk about how we move forward with these improvements. So what we did was look at the budget, and in reviewing the items that were listed and the budget dollars we had, they did not match. We had less budget than what it would cost to do the items that were on the list. So what we realized is that we should do another additional outreach process with the community and let them help provide some input into what are the steps or the items that we should move forward with. So what we did was created what we'd call a survey, we're calling it a feedback process, to ask the community what they wanted to do. So that feedback process included multiple items. We also made sure to include the description and cost of the items so that when the community was making those decisions, they knew the details of each of those items that they were prioritizing. Additionally, we wanted to ask them about what were important to them, because it wasn't just the areas we needed to check a box for under the budget, but we also needed to find out, based on community feedback we were hearing around town, was people really wanted to share with us what was important to them. So we wanted to make sure that was also included. So the outreach process included a website with some FAQs. We had a focus group where we met with different leaders and talked about what we needed to include. So we showed them the survey and the information and how we were going to present it, and they provided some feedback. We also held some open house meetings. We did social media posts, utility bill inserts. We also mailed postcards out to the 98277 zip code. And just to go back on the social media posts, we also promoted them so they went further out than just our community. We also had information on YouTube and Channel 10 that were videos about the process. We had some flyers and then public engagement. One of the things we did to address those community members who said, I don't look at social media, I don't see this stuff online, we made sure to print those and make them available at both the city office, the Chamber of Commerce, and the center. So they were available there. Some of the samples of these materials look like this. So as you can see, we had a variety of ways that people could connect with us and talk to us about their feedback. The process also included an improvement map. So what we wanted to do was show them where in the park those areas would be impacted or what those improvements look like so that they could have an understanding of that. So with that, we received 703 responses. 34% use the park weekly, meaning that that's where they go on a weekly basis and they hang out, and so they see it on a regular basis. And I don't think this is a surprise to anybody on council, but the number one priority is the windmill. So that was the top answer that came back. We also found out what the type of respondents were, where they live. We asked a lot of information about their demographics, so we understood what their responses were, what their reason for their responses might be, and draw some conclusions there. The top 3 improvements that we saw come out of the results were the windmill, picnic areas, and shoreline enhancements. When people were responding, they continually talked about the windmill and picnic areas and wanting to see more coverage in the area of maybe like one big covered area, adding some more shade, things like that, so that when they're picnicking in the park, they could actually enjoy that area. Then shoreline enhancements, people wanted more access, potentially ADA access, being able to get down on the beach safely and easily. And as I've heard council talk about, we've all know that's an issue where you're trying to get over the logs or the remaining driftwoods that's there so that you can access that area. Then the feedback about the priorities. So I'm going to turn this over to Brian so that he can start.
Thanks, Sabrina. So want to just frame this in realizing that, this survey was done last year, and it was done in a climate of working toward placement of the windmill. The angel statue was also being looked at. So there was a lot of different thoughts about what needed to happen here at the park last year. Now, since then, we've had a couple different situations with erosion of the shoreline around the park, and we've had line breaks and different needs out there. So this really is sort of a framework for discussion. Ultimately, the priorities that come out of this from those who took the survey in the community are to inform council of, hey, these are things that are important to us. But this is your park. You're going to have to help inform staff how you want to move forward with these priorities. So feedback about the opportunities that we gave to the public of things that needed to happen out there, it wasn't surprising to us to see these ones come out. So picnic areas were number one, improvements to the amphitheater area and activating that space was number 2, dog park area for dog owners to walk their dog in a safe environment, and then Great Lawn, or really what that's speaking to is an area for special events. Some of the other things that came out of that were public art, shoreline improvements, and of course, as was mentioned, the windmill. So some of the additional comments that you see there. Now, we've received other comments since then, some of them on here, some of them not. Safety was definitely one that has been spoken of by the community to staff and to the park board. Increased maintenance and cleanliness of amenities out there, more trees, vegetation, more of a naturalized feel to the park, and also restrooms. Now, while the Portland Loos were being planned and starting to get installed around the area at the time that this was being conducted, so there was sort of this perception of, oh, we're going to address that. The Portland Loos are great for maintenance and safety from a staff standpoint, but a lot of people in the public don't like them. They don't like the openness of them, the exposure, they're not very warm when it's a little cooler or have a pretty stiff wind coming off of the water. And so restrooms is another area that has been addressed by the public. So improvements that park users wanted to see, top 20 listed there. Again, the windmill was on everyone's mind at the time of the survey. Camping opportunities, activities, activating the park with different festivals and just fun things for the community to do. Need for more parking, especially when we have sports teams that are on site using the ball fields. Again, opportunities for dog owners, playground improvements, adding an additional playground on the west side of the park. That kind of went into more indoor area spaces or a recreational center, volleyball courts, different just different variety of amenities. Pickleball courts was also one that was talked about in the original planning process. And then, again, increased maintenance and activities. So what we also looked at as we went through these survey results was going back, and what was one of the most telling things to me, I don't have a slide up for it, but it's in the packet of the survey results, was why people visited the park. And out of 703 respondents, which is a pretty good cross-section of our community, the top 3 results were walking and running, utilizing the beach, strolling along the beach, and dog walking. So the community really utilizes it as a green space to come, kind of get away from the home, the city, everything else, and just be out in a beautiful green space. All this is really just strolling along and enjoying the park, enjoying the ambiance, enjoying the environment, seeing kids playing, just being somewhere there on the shoreline. And as a great amenity and gem of the community, having this beachfront property, that's how the community sees it and how they utilize it. The next 3 responses were utilizing the amenities there: the playground, the splash park, the lagoon, and special events like the farmers market were all high priorities for people and why they visited the park. So we looked at this on how do people currently use the park? What are some of the improvements that they wanted to see that we saw of this? And then what are some of the oopses that we wanted to fix, the critical items that needed to be addressed? And so staff's recommendations on, based off that feedback and utilization of the park and some of the critical priorities that have come up, especially with the erosion damage that we saw, were repair the shoreline and using some of the existing funding for making those repairs. Right now we have emergency measures in place with sandbags and some temporary fill in there. We have to show the state that we are in the process of planning an improvement to permanently address that damage by this early fall in order to extend that permit process. So we're going to roll this repair the shoreline into a greater shoreline restoration project of the city that goes all the way from Fred Marsh to the marina. That engineering will be bringing back to council and talking more about. Another one is enhancing the pavilion. Creating a few little improvements that'll make it easier with a backdrop, improving sound quality for us to start programming that with special events, more concerts in the park, movies in the park, performances, educational opportunities, just doing fun things that get the community out. And my esteemed colleague, Captain Slowick, is working on National Night Out that's coming up this next week that we want to make sure we invite you guys all to. Just a great example of some of the neat events that we do out there in the park. It's sort of our premier event park. Fixing the splash park. So when we first put in the splash pad, we didn't have a great controller with it, didn't have a lot of great programmable ability to make sure we are managing water effectively and efficiently. And so it was over $200,000 we were spending just on water use. Now we've cut that almost in half by making adjustments to that controller, but we want to make some updates to that equipment and make some improvements there. Picnic areas, seating options is a big one. Adding some shelters, especially on the west side of the lagoon and around the lagoon. That kind of goes with number 6, some shady areas near the splash park and lagoon. The first weekend we opened up the splash park, we had hundreds of people. We had about well over 200 people at the splash park, another 100 plus in and around the lagoon, my kids included. And just a big draw for the community. And there's not a lot of good picnicking seating areas, and that's how the community uses it. So we want to make some of those improvements, as well as rental facility improvements. And the windmill really goes to speak to that as a facility that can be rented out with a kitchen and different things like that to add to that inventory. Adding barbecue grills and just some additional options out there that doesn't take so much wear and tear on the built-in kitchens that we have. Almost all our lock controllers out there are failing. We're going to have to replace those locks, even though they're fairly new. They just get used very hard. We get some vandalism, some damage. But we know that it's a great amenity for the community. It's heavily rented and utilized, so that's something we want to continue to speak to the demand for. And then there are some opportunities with the Interpretive Center. Went out there and toured the area with a couple of little infrastructure changes. We can easily have that as a rental space or a programmable space without undermining the integrity of security for the clean water facility. So that's some of the staff recommendations. And just really quickly going back to the city's 6-year CIP includes additional $676,000 in funding from REIT funding to complete future improvements. That goes along with the $408,000 of current project funding balance for outreach and design work for future improvements of the park. And then we have an additional $250,000 is included for 2027. So that brings the total project fund balance to $1.334 million. Now, as much as that is, we cannot address every want and desire out at Windjammer Park. And that was part of why Sabrina and the team went forward with the survey to get some thoughts on, okay, well, we're not going to be able to take it to the end zone with everything that was included in the original early conceptual planning process and charrettes that we had about all the different improvements. And if you look on that improvement map, you'll see a couple of different things in there that we don't have that were talked about. And so as we come to today and look at, okay, here's everything that we've built in the first phase. Here are some opportunities, some low-hanging fruit that we can take care of that will be easy to provide the community, see some immediate, nice, flashy amenity results that enhance their experience and enjoyability of the park. We want to basically just provide this as a framework for council to provide their comments and your thoughts. As you talk with your constituents, as you read over the survey results, which now are a year old, and look at the needs out there and how the community utilizes the park after the improvements that we've made in phase one. What would you like to see us go forward with in utilizing this funding to do the most good for the most people going forward? So with that, happy to answer any questions that council has, and we'd love to hear your comments and any discussion you have in direction to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Then we'll turn to council. Councilor Hoffmeyer.
I like a lot of the staff recommendations on there, and I don't really question the order either. Did want to make note, looking at the improvements that the respondents wanted to see. No surprise to anybody that the windmill's first, obviously. 112 people responded that, but I did really think that, in the language there, return the windmill. I think there's a lot of power in the word return. I think they want something returned that they feel was taken. And, so as we go through all this, I think it's very valuable to see that returning the windmill is number one and bringing back the RV is number two. So to go with the full-fledged RV park, maybe there's some cost there, but do we really get the ball moving with at least amending our zoning code to where that is allowable somewhere? And, is there a way to, it almost fits into the Windjammer vicinity. Is there a way to get dry camping going at Catalina down by the marina, for instance, at least for some of these big, at least for the bulk of the summer months? But I do think there's a lot of value there in that. So with the windmill, we just need to work closely with the Rotary and those partners and make sure we're doing enough to help them. If there's something more council needs to do, let us know. And again, if it's amending the zoning code or something that can allow you to start getting the RV park back, for instance, just let us know. But other than that, I think that the priority of everything else looks pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Stuckey.
Still going to push for an aquarium in that interpretive center. I think that'd be great. I am a little confused on the data, though. So, page 9, the top three, There's windmill, picnic area, shoreline enhancements. That's the top 3. Page 10, feedback about priorities. It says picnic area, amphitheater, number 3, dog park, and then great lawn. And then page 12, where it says top 20 improvements, it's windmill, camping RV tent, activities put in the park. I'm a little confused on what the top 3 improvements the committee wanted, because each one of those has something a little different.
So part of the challenge with the data was, and we wanted to do this on purpose, was give people the selections that they had to choose from. But then in addition, there were questions where they were able to actually give us detailed feedback on their comments. So what that is the difference between actual fields that they filled in and then me digging through the data of, I'm going to say, multiple lists of things that people said that they were interested in and wanted to see. So that's where that data is different. So that was the goal, was to give people an opportunity to really share their thoughts and not be held to just the items that we had listed from our discussions of the items that we wanted to talk about. So it's just the way they filled them in. So I can show you the raw data, but it's a lot of people saying like, more trees, area for my kids to play, things like that. And so those were then compiled differently to understand what that data resulted into.
I'm just trying to figure out a little bit, because some of these, like add more trees, I mean, that's something that's, let's be honest, relatively inexpensive, relatively easy. The one I'm getting hung up on a little bit is the dog park. I noticed that wasn't in any of the recommended things, and I'm not all for a dog park. But that being said, we have a history of surveys and not always following them. And I would hate for that to have been one of the top things and not be something that we're addressing. So that's why I'm trying to figure out where the dog park truly is in this.
So there were a lot of people who talked about wanting some space for their dogs. Some were specific in saying a fenced-in area where they can play. Some were saying an open area. It just depended. One of the problems with staff looking at that as one of the options is when we look at that map and look at the overall area of the park, we were trying to make sure that we were fitting in all the items that we were talking about, and in doing so, there wasn't necessarily enough room to add a dog park somewhere with a great lawn, with all the other amenities that we were talking about. So that is the reason that we didn't include it in that list, because when we looked at the list of phases, it wasn't in there. And then in addition to that, it was something that we had heard people talk about, but that's why we had those additional fields for people to tell us what they were interested in. So it is one of the items that the community brought to the table.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add to that a little bit here, Mayor? Listening to Sabrina talk, the other point you're kind of getting to is there was conflicting idea. There's people that say keep the ball fields and the people that want open space. There was people who said put in a dog park, and the people that said do not do a dog park. So she kind of tried to digest that together.
Okay, thank you. I'm just making sure that these are objective, not subjective, as much as possible. So, thank you.
One other thing to keep in mind is, one, every comment is super valuable to us as a Parks and Recreation Department. And hey, here, for each person speaking this, there are probably dozens and dozens of others that agree, right? So everything we hear in here is going into the ether of eventually forming a Parks and Recreation master plan of, hey, here's the desires and needs of the community. I went out with the Parks Board last week and we toured several different sites. And one of the things that I told them is, keep in mind that good park system design dictates that you don't have every park be everything to everyone, right? It's okay to have a specialized, naturalized area where people just go and picnic and sit at a bench and just enjoy nature. It's okay to have one park that is focused on league sports play, a regional sports park, right? And another area that has, is more for just the casual user for picnicking, for walking. Maybe you have a dog park. Maybe you have amenities like tennis or a playground. Windjammer, it's very tempting to want to shove as much into it as possible. So, like Sabrina said, all these things are things we want to consider. And just because we have things up on staff recommendations doesn't mean that if they're not on there, we're not going to do them. We're just looking at how do we want to start with knocking off some of this funding and getting some of these things done. So we're also going to take into consideration the comments that you give us today to kind of direct us of, hey, this is what I'm hearing is important to the community. I'd really like to see this included. That's going to go into that as well.
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand raised.
And Councilor Wiesner?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Yeah, and thanks for that explanation too, Brian. And Councilmember Stuckey, I will let you know too, on the Parks Board, we have been discussing this dog park thing and trying to figure out a logical path. Quite frankly, the dog park we have supplied for our community, out at the end of a dead-end road off of Goldie Road that's basically full of gravel and weeds is just not appropriate. And we understand that, and we've been having some interesting discussions, such as actually having a volunteer pay box similar to what the State Parks Department has, so that the users of the park would help fund the maintenance of it. Because the maintenance is what kills it. I think we can find possibly a spot that would facilitate a dog park, but better than what we've got. But maintaining it is the cost we're trying to struggle with, while having while understanding that our jewel Windjammer Park, needs some additional maintenance, as what came out in this survey. And I know Brian Smith's working really hard on getting a handle on that. I just wanted to kind of touch a little bit on some of these the top 20 write-ins, because let's face it, when multiple people write in the same thing, that's really the highlight, right? Because that takes more effort than checking a box, right? And I certainly want to agree with Councilor Hoffmeyer, and I know Brian Smith knows this, of our desire to get some sort of camping back, even if it's a dry camping, something to start. It's a double bonus. Not only is it a revenue generator, it was over $250,000 generated for the revenue generated for the city, but it's a tourist draw, and people do come here because of it. And like I told Brian, I've got friends who used to come here every 4th of July and every hauling happening and stay in our RV park in town, and they just don't come back anymore. They don't come for those events any longer. It's not as easy for them to come stay here, especially when the closest camping spot we have is 15, 20 minutes outside of town. And I wanted to note that there's an active discussion going on the Parks Board involving playgrounds and updating playgrounds, and not only updating the equipment there, but updating it with some more inclusive equipment, and having the parks be more user friendly. I think the thought there is that's going to kind of continue. That's going to be a little bit of a process as we move through these parks and do the natural updates. We're probably going to be a little more conscious of how we update them. And then we've got a few parks that have got some play equipment that maybe just doesn't need that play equipment anymore, right? And rather than update that, we can get a little bit more nicer stuff in the other parks. I think one thing I don't know that we've discussed a lot is volleyball courts with nets or pits or something down at the beach. Obviously the Great Lawn can be a multi-use area, and I think that's something probably to look at as a city. A lot of city parks do that during the summer, right? They go out there and put up a volleyball net for the summer, and normally by the end of the summer the volleyball net's destroyed, but somebody got a lot of great enjoyment out of it for the summer out in the field, and maybe that's something we should take a look at. And obviously activities, Brian's working hard on that, and like I said at the last meeting when we moved some of those items forward, I totally support the efforts of getting the activities going down in our parks and having the summer activities and having stuff for our kids and young adults to do. So, I just wanted to point out on this top 20 list that it's refreshing to see that with the vast majority of them, we're actually having tangible discussion of how to move it forward, not just to talk about it. And so I'm just kind of excited about that, and I'm excited, for what the new age of parks in our community can bring, and I'm going to continue to be there at those Parks Board meetings and giving my 2 cents worth, whether Brian and the team want to hear it or not, but certainly it's something I'm passionate about, and I know Brian and everybody on the Parks Board has shown a passion. We've got a lot of new members on that Park Board, and their enthusiasm is showing, and I expect to see some great results out of this survey, and I expect to see great things from the Parks Board as we continue to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Anyone else on that? Yes, Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I really like your statement that a park can't have everything. And part of Windjammer is it is such a beautiful green spot with an unobstructed view of the water. And if you start cramming things in there, the RV park disappearing. Yes, a lot of people don't come back. It was cheap. It was right there on the water. They didn't have to walk anywhere. It was easy to go over to a grocery store and stuff. But they were blowing the fuses. We don't have space to put one back. I mean, you get the RVs now that I don't know how long they are, as long as a bus. And they want their air conditioner, their microwave, and their TV to go. And that's a lot of electricity. And that's their camping, and it would take up, you would lose half of Windjammer Park to have it there. So Carl Friend offered to sell part of his property if we wanted to put it over there to keep the view. I don't even know if the land is still available, but I'm sorry, I don't see how. I would love to see an RV park, city RV park, but not using the Windjammer space. I mean, once that green space is gone, you'll never get it back. You can still have, they've had dog competition down there, put up little fences and stuff. You've had the little kids soccer, but if you start doing heavy volleyball, you're going to be replanting the grass. I mean, it's, they used to set up a few volleyball courts on the old basketball courts that were down there in front of the little things. And so we moved them over there so they still have it and stuff. So I think there's other ways to kind of do it. An off-leash park, that's also going to take a tremendous space. You've got a fence, and now you've got to mow inside the fence. You've got to mow outside the fence, and you've got to trim around it. But it's a wonderful place to take your 1 or 3 dogs on a leash and walk the park and see friends, and they can go down into the beach. And at times I'll admit that our dog is off leash to run into the water and come right back out when there's not anybody else around. But these are all good ideas, but if you start putting up fences and trying to put everything in it, then you lose the jewel to just be able to see. That we used to have planted near the beach, I think you remember, they were the cottonwood trees that just shed everywhere. They're not really particularly green, not a pretty bark. And when we cut them down, everybody said, "Oh my gosh, you killed all these trees." Well, now it's like, wow, I can see the water. They forgot that you're right there. You could see the water. It's, once you start digging things up and putting it, so we need to think really hard before you start doing that. We can have parks for different things. They put a lot of thought into Bailey's, which was a tribute to the Johnson's little girl that died. And our staff helped revitalize some, and they raise money for other, and that's a great little, but it doesn't have handicap type of apparatuses for little kids that need it. But we can't promise everything to everybody. There's a way to do it. We were at Port of Everett, and we were taking advantage of reciprocal mortgage there. And right across the water was their big park. Well, they finally outlawed kites because it kept wrapping around the power wires. But they were beautiful to watch. Oh my gosh. But they had toys, ladder golf and cornhole and stuff for people just to use, but as we watched, people just didn't walk away with that stuff. It was there to share, and you met someone else, and, hey, will you play the game with me, you know, kind of thing. And then they had a blow-up movie theater. And the only time I've seen the blow-up movie theater is when Military Appreciation Park had it. It was great fun. They had Lyle and the Crocodile. And if you were on a boat, they even flashed how you could listen to it on a radio. But it was open. They had a temporary kiosk, so someone sold popcorn or brownies or sodas or something like that, but it could all be taken down. We've got the nice kitchens, and we've got that area, that stuff, but I just pray we don't vote to cram everything in there, because once it's gone, it's gone. It's like having the forest to look at, and then you take it away. Oh, well, we could put houses in there, blah, blah, and it's like, wait a minute, what happened to the trees? What happened to, you know, so I just, the other day I parked and had a quick breakfast there, and I sat with 10 other cars, I counted, we're all sitting and just looking at the ocean, and we're parked right there, over there towards the basketball courts on that side. And it's like, where else can you go and do that? Camping, we've had camping with Race Week. I'm sure the mayor will remember that. But once you start camping, no offense, but how are you going to limit our transients? We had a lady who had a cat, I'm sure the police department. You had where you go into the park, and there was one little area, and she had a tent, and I think, were there 6 or 7 cats in that little pup tent? And there wasn't a restroom down there yet, and so you had trash and whatever else. So that's another thing, if you bring back camping, there can be a designated area. That's why we had to be so specific for the kayaking, because they're coming in and they're leaving. Everything's in their kayak. And so just really take the time to think it through. Don't take away something and then go, why did we ever do that? You know, it'd be nice to have a swimming pool down there, but that takes away everything. And we've got a nice one. So I think with our Parks Director and looking at available spaces, and maybe we just need to put some money and do a collection to improve that park. Sometimes we go to the county off-leash park that's by the softball field. It's a lot of dirt, but it's got some trees that are spaced out that you can run in, but it's just, it takes up more space than you think, and I'm sorry, thank you for your time and patience, but just be careful what you asked for and haven't thought it out, so thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Munns, for your input. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Wittgenstein.
Excellent feedback and report. A couple of things that come to mind. What's the chances of getting more current data from the residents? You had mentioned this was about a year old. And I enjoyed all of the selections. I too would be curious as to how and what the improvements to the enhancement of the pavilion might look like, as well as if we're providing shaded areas, are they permanent or are they, you know, somewhat temporary that are there for seasonal type pieces, in those regards. Yeah.
And just to address the, I guess, update portion of it, like I said, we have been getting additional feedback from people as we've discussed this with the Parks Board and staff, things like the restrooms, which you didn't see in the survey, but that's something that we're hearing now, and the maintenance, safety aspects of the park, things like that. So while not a master plan, you know, all this information will go in towards a Parks and Recreation master plan that will be more of a living organic document that will take us out for the next 5 years and kind of give us a roadmap dictating of, okay, here's where we want to make improvements, when we'll make them, and how we're going to fund them over the next 5 years. So appreciate your comments and feedback, Council. Thank you very much.
Councilor Hoffmeyer, one.
I just wanted to add 2 more things. I concur with what Councilor Munns is saying about protecting the open space and the RV park if we get to that point. needs to be somewhere else in that complex, not in Windjammer. I certainly concur with that, and really appreciate her passion and wisdom there. The second thing, the Parks Board, they're doing exciting things. Jana, Carrie, you, the rest of everybody. I think usually get a chance to catch up with Councilor Wiesner after every Parks meeting, and it's usually the most excited I hear him every month. So just to parlay off of what he said, it's very incredible to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Nice job. We'll move on to the next section on our agenda, which is finance. And we have two items under finance. First is the WHIDBEY Camano Tourism Joint Advisory Board funding. And for that, we have with us from our finance department, our analyst, Chaz Webster. Chaz, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Share the screen here. All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and staff. I am Chaz Webster, Finance and Performance Analyst, and this will be a discussion about the annual contribution of lodging tax revenue to the Joint Advisory Board. The city has been asked to restore the 1% commitment, which is half of the additional 2% lodging tax. Currently, the city contributes $20,000 of the 2% additional tax, paid at $5,000 on a quarterly basis each year. The city has the authority to levy lodging tax on short-term rentals within city limits. The tax is collected as a sales tax paid by the customer at the time of the transaction, and the revenues must be used for eligible tourism promotion activities and tourism-related facilities. There are two types of lodging taxes described here, the basic and the additional, and the city collects both. The additional 2% is subject to the joint agreement. Per municipal code, the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee comments on any changes in the use of revenue, reviews grant applications, and makes funding recommendations to City Council. Any proposal to assign lodging tax funding must be submitted to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee for review and comment at least 45 days before final action can be taken on the proposal by the legislative body. Listed by year is the joint agreement history. In 1999, City approved levying the additional 2% tax. In 2000, the joint agreement was executed and implementing the full 2% contribution to the Joint Tourism Fund. In 2005, Amendment 1 reduced the 2% to 1%. And in 2009, Amendment 2 reduced the 1% to $20,000. In 2011, Amendment 3 contained non-monetary revisions. And in 2019, the Joint Advisory Board requested to restore the 1% contribution. The city declined after LTAC recommendation, stating any additional funds over the annual $20,000 contribution would be applied for through the LTAC grant process. The LTAC grant history for the 2% Joint Advisory Board is shown here. For years 2015 through 2018, the Joint Advisory Board did apply for additional funds through the LTAC grant process and received additional funding. In 2020, the 3-year grant awards were offered. The Joint Advisory Board was approved for a multi-year grant, but declined, stating after thoroughly reviewing the contract terms, expectations, and the proposed amount of $12,000 per year, the officers and management committee determined that the contract was not a good fit, and they were not moving forward. Here is a list of our returning grant recipients that have applied since 2018. I did include the $20,000 annual contribution on this list for purposes of totaling the expenditures per year. Also included is a 5 or 6 year average per recipient to give you an idea of what is requested each year. I wanted to bring your attention to the total expenditure average of $302,000, which will be used in the following slides. This chart is a quick view of the comparison of the projected 2024 revenue, which is the blue column, to expenditures, which is the orange column. at status quo on the left and at 1% on the right. Keep in mind these numbers are estimates. In 2024, the 1% contribution would be projected at about $87,000, resulting in an additional $67,000 to expenditures. In this particular example, the 1% expenditure column will surpass projected revenues by about $21,000. So should council agree to the 1% contribution, the grant offerings would likely have to be reduced to keep expenditures at or below projected revenues. Revenues from 2018 through projected 2024 are provided here for both the basic and additional tax, as well as total grant outlays and payments to Island County Joint Tourism Fund. Contribution options are provided on the right side of the screen. The 2% column is equal to 100% of that 2% additional tax. 1.5% is equal to 75%. 1% is equal to 50%. And in 2024, again, the estimated would be about $87,000. 0.4% is equal to 20% of the tax, and 0.3% is equal to 15% of the tax. And you can see that the $20,000 contribution does fall short of the 15% column, other than on fiscal year 2020. In 2009, 13 years ago, before that 1% contribution was reduced to $20,000, council asked the question, is there any measurable increase in tourism to the city of Oak Harbor commensurate with the greater contribution the city is making to the Island County Joint Tourism effort? Today's question to consider is the current $20,000 contribution commensurate with the work products benefiting the city provided by Island County Joint Tourism. Therefore, should the city remain status quo and require any additional funds to be awarded through the LTAC grant process? Should the city reinstate the 1% contribution? Or should the city look at a different percentage or a flat amount? Once the decision is made, should there be a change, the proposal would be submitted to LTAC for review and comment at least 45 days before final action can be taken. Then an amendment to the joint agreement must be executed to formalize the change. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Chaz. So this is not an action item, but I would turn to council for questions and input. And yes, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Love the work that WHIDBEY CAMANO Tourism does. Love the presentation every time. For myself, you know, I would be okay with amending that amount. You know, 20 is probably not enough. You know, personally, I might be comfortable going to 35, but I personally would not be okay with making the 1% automatic. That's all I have today.
Councilor Stuckey.
So obviously something I've dug in a little farther, just being the LTAC chair. And I always try to see both sides. On the one side, $20,000, considering what the other municipalities fund and how much we're getting out of it, isn't great. So I'm not by any means saying that that amount should not be increased in some form. However, I also think there's something to be said for accountability as opposed to just writing a check. If we'd agree to give them, say, $50,000, $100,000, whatever that may be, we get a report, but we don't get a whole lot of control over what those funds do. Where if they go through the LTAC process, it requires a little bit of hoops, and if we're giving a large chunk, that's fair to have a little bit of hoops, and there is a little more accountability on it. You also got to consider if we give them the 1%, that is less for other organizations. Now, this last LTAC grant period, we approved a very large amount. We're going to work on that in the next meeting or two. That very large amount is not going to be as large this year. That was like a one-time thing, reducing the fund a little bit. But, I mean, let's be honest, one of the big people that could get affected, organization, would be the chamber. There might be a couple projects that aren't as notorious that could come off, but a chamber would take a hit after their 3 years up. I mean, things like the carnival, part of the LTAC money went to bringing that back. You know, they have a coordinator for events that have helped make events great post-COVID, and I would hate to reduce their funding in order to give that to the WYATT and tourism. But that being said, I know with the LTAC we need to tighten the screws a little bit and make sure that everything is truly promoting tourism. But I don't think there's anything wrong with asking them to go through the process like everybody else, just so there's more accountability. But I do think they should apply, and I think they should get more than the 20,000 through the proper process.
Thank you, Councilor Stuckey. Anyone else? Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. I was the first city council member on the joint tourism. I also wrote the conflict of interest. I don't know if they're still using it or not. And there was another one because they didn't have any.
I can't hear.
Lost partial audio.
Mike.
Is really the cheerleader for the city. Whatever project or the businesses, you know, if they want to do the Sasquatch Walk or Wine and Bites or whatever, the chamber helps, and they're also the one helping educate our businesses on how to do better. How, if you're a new business, how do you set it up? What do you need to make sure? You know, which accountants and tel will help give you, you know, they'll come and help get you set up. So they get things together to help you be successful. Joint tourism does a lot. So I would like to see it raised or, as you said, applying. So maybe we go up to 30,000, and then if they have a special project, then they can submit it with LTAC and give us a list of what the money is going to be used for. But it's hard to, the wow wagon that the chamber does up at Deception Pass, because there's anywhere from 1 to 3 million people visit it. And it's got all the brochures and stuff about our city, but I think it also has stuff for the county. So somehow there has to be a balance. I think the larger portion should go to the chamber still, because they're our cheerleader. They're the ones, and it's a cooperation, but we're also part of the county. And we need to support the county, and they are now supporting us, that I see, from when I started in '08, and everything was new, so.
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Anyone else? Yes.
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand raised.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just want to jump in. You know, I am the current city liaison for the tourism board, and I get to see, you know, each month a group of some pretty smart people. I'm actually quite amazed with the what some of these people bring to the table. Some of them are, you know, from the tourism industry, you know, and of course we have all the chambers of commerces, you know, involved. You know, and we have some folks that are really smart in the development of our websites, and obviously you get, there is a lot of effort put into rebranding the entire concept of what, would be Camano and to the Embrace would be Camano concept. And then, I think just the examination of just that simple little logo, resulted in hours and hours of conversation, but it was quite interesting to observe. So, obviously $20,000, and it looks like we've been, supplying them that amount since, 2009 roughly, right? So, $20,000 and $2009 is a lot different than $20,000 and 2023 dollars. So quite amazed at the resiliency of the tourism board to make more out of less, because it really has, obviously we're giving them less money and less support than we did in years past. And I don't know quite what happened with that, $55,000 amount. And it sounds like maybe we put too many little caveats on that money, which it seems to me as though we should have been able to, sit down and probably work through that. I think that it was the intent of that LTAC board for that money to move forward and support that organization. And obviously it didn't. So, I would certainly support that discussion moving forward to even this out a little bit. We certainly are being carried by the county and the other local communities that are contributing considerably more. From what I see, the vast majority of the marketing is really island-wide, and they've done quite a few things, such as establish, the trail guides and, a bunch of things that, of course, ecotourism's been a big conversation for them, and they're doing lots of work towards that. And obviously the island is a great place to bring eco-tourists to. It's, quite frankly, the tourists we want to see, right? And so, I'd certainly support it moving forward. I'd certainly also respect Councilmember Stuckey's position as the head of the LTAC committee and the guy who I know has dug in to this whole thing, and has some thoughts as to what we're going to do with that LTAC money moving forward that's going to be in the best interest of the city. So I certainly will respect whatever comes out of that, but I just wanted everybody to know I certainly support that discussion of us supplying additional support to this program. And I see firsthand a lot of great things and a lot of great discussions that are taking place at those meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Back to Councilor Stuckey.
If the council is all right out with it, and if she's all right with it, may I ask a question of the director? Is there any objection? Do you mind? Well, I'm sorry. I should have been more specific.
She is here with us.
Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah. We asked her to come
So-
show her support.
Because again, I agree, we need to give you guys more funding. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. What is the issue, or is there an issue with going through the process as opposed to just cutting a check every year?
Well, the original intent of the interlocal agreement was for 2%, additional 2% that the lodgings brought on themselves would go to a county-wide effort. So that was the original intent. It was not originally intended to be cut into little pieces and divided all around. So we want to return to that original intent. For us to compete with local 501c3s in your community, we're a very different program in terms of the reach. We're reaching international travel writers in the industry and visitors. It's a very different kind of program. It's not apples to apples in some respects. It's much larger, and it's things that a small community can never do. So I did go back. I will tell you, I came back many years with large proposals, and that 55,000 was actually became 12,000. So when we requested 55, we were awarded 12 over a 3-year period. So it wasn't a 55,000 that we got. We asked for 55, we asked for 30 one year and got 9. I mean, I think it just continued to go down every time we asked. So it came to a point where maybe this isn't a good fit. The best fit really is for you to stay in touch with what we're doing, make sure that you see the monthly reports that we provide with a lot of accountability every month. both Maggie and Jim serve on that committee. They're there. We have room for an Oak Harbor lodging person to sit on that board. That's been vacant for a few years. So I think there's more you could do to be at the table. And we'd like that. We'd welcome that more than this returning with proposals that may seem less local. I mean, they're not as micro-local. They're more big picture, collaboration with the other chambers. We're doing things that no one else is doing. And I don't think it's it wasn't my decision to give the money back, I will say. I fought that a little, and with my own officers, was like, well, let's stay at the table, let's play at the table. But the discussion was, this is not the right approach. You should not keep going back. That is not how we're funded. It's an interlocal agreement. It's very clear in the interlocal how it was to be funded, and it was not through a flat amount or through grants. So, I don't know, is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, some follow-up thoughts, follow-up questions.
Yeah.
One, you can always apply for a 3-year. Last time was a little bit of an anomaly, I admit, and I may be off a little bit, but I think there was $60,000 that just went back in the pot because it wasn't even applied for. So the idea that, there was money you could have applied then. With the $12,000, I understand it's minor, but I also know the hoops, well, there are hoops. They're not astronomical hoops. To say that the $12,000, why wouldn't you accept it? I understand that wasn't your decision. It sounded like you fought to keep that, and I appreciate that. But it's kind of like, is our money no good? I just like the idea of having a little bit of control of, hey, this $50,000 we're going to apply for is going to be used for this project. And I understand
You do have control.
county-wide, and I understand it's a little bit more difficult where like the chamber's a little more tangible. Carnival here.
Yeah.
Holiday happening here, as opposed to general marketing, which is a little more harder to quantify. But I just personally like the idea of going through the process as opposed to a check, and you could do a 3-year, that is an option.
And we
So-
do promote the carnival and Holland
Sure.
happening as
Oh, I
well.
understand.
We do
Yep.
work in partnership,
And again,
promote together.
we need to fund you more. I'm just wanted to be, personally would like to be done a certain way, so there's a little more, in my opinion, a little more accountability. That's just one opinion on here.
Councilor Munns?
Could I ask a question, Mayor?
Sure.
Jerry.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Hello.
I know at first, the chamber was only getting yearly, and it was really hard to plan their budget for when the money was awarded to them and how they're trying to figure out staff and
Sure.
projects.
Absolutely.
And so eventually, the council, you did a 2-year and then it's a 3-year kind of thing. Maybe we have new council members, the international aspect. You do the, not Slim Jims or whatever, they go on all the ferries
Sure.
and in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of outside that we never see unless you just happen to look for it. But
Right.
can you give some examples that might help the council on, we just can't come and ask for one project kind of funding?
So we've developed, absolutely, we've developed relationships with the Port of Seattle, with State of Washington Tourism. Those are ongoing relationships where now we have we're a trusted ally with them. So, for example, earlier this year, we had 14 travel buyers and media from Germany that came. They stayed at the Coachman Inn, and they saw Oak Harbor, and those are things that are because of the work we're doing over the years. And partly that was funding that you helped provide to help grow those relationships. So those are things that they really aren't something you can just write a grant for necessarily. That's an ongoing growing of a relationship. We, working with the State of Washington Tourism, did a skill shop workshop with over 100 people all over the country and some all over the world to learn what we're doing with this new Embrace program. There's that much interest in what's happening here. So those aren't necessarily, it wouldn't have been a grant. A grant might have been, I can't think of what a grant would fund. It would be difficult. Not impossible, but what we're doing are larger ongoing relationship building. They take years to do. And we do work closely with each other, with the chambers, and it's something I'd like to continue doing. We'd love to have you be bigger partners. I'm glad I'm hearing good things. It sounds like there's agreement. It's just a matter of how that's funded, whether it's funded through through something that I do think there is accountability. I do feel you do have a voice and a place at our table every month at the board meetings and at the management committee level, and we do provide written reports. I mean, there's a lot of ways to find out more about what we're doing if you aren't feeling connected. We could come back here more often, for example.
Yeah,
And I feel like we're growing the pie, not just a piece, not just the Oak Harbor piece. We're like growing the whole pie, because this is why more lodging taxes are coming in. It's not just one community's work. It's this cohesive community-wide is helping grow that.
it's nice to know the active participation by both of you with a partnership. And I guess I wasn't aware we didn't have a current council member on the board, because we used to, that was
You do
always
have a
one of our
council
things.
member.
We do?
You do. You
Jim,
don't have a
okay.
lodging member. Yeah.
So, okay.
I think you're just too busy. The lodging.
Could I ask a question? Why don't we have a lodging member?
Yeah, outreach has been done many times.
To
and-
try to go to one of the three?
Oh, yeah, including short-term rentals. Yeah.
And
We should fix that.
should I work to fix that?
I would love that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, but it is your, but I assume it's isn't it your chair?
It would
that
be
you're
your
trying to fill
appointment. The appointment comes from the mayor and the city council. You
For
will-
the lodging?
Yes,
person?
for the
Oh.
city of Oak Harbor. We do have an unincorporated North Whidbey. That's Greg Lanza from Wildwood Farm. So what we're missing is that voice from a local. So you have more opportunity there.
Okay,
We'd like to, well, no matter what the outcome today, we'd love to see that happen.
sounds good. Counselor Hoffmeyer?
Looking at the numbers that are up on the screen there in front of you, and I mean, I'm only one council member, one of 7, so it's not worth a lot some days. Other days it's worth something. As opposed to applying for the 3-year, I mean, I'd be comfortable with 0.6%. I'd be comfortable with 0.6% myself. Does something like that work better for you than applying for the 3-year? Is there something between where we're at and the 1% that would work?
Oh, of course. I think it's the flat fee that is part of the challenge, because it hasn't kept pace with inflation, and it's becoming, it just feels really out of balance with the rest of anyone. So we asked for 1%. Others said, why aren't you asking for the full 2? And it's a starting point, so.
That's my only input on it. I would be comfortable, going to 0.6 for now.
I should ask my boss to say something about that.
I just need to say something, is that there is this interlocal agreement, and if we have to come before you every year and that number changes, we have to redo the interlocal agreement all the time, which includes the county, the town of Coopville, city of Langley. And so that could be problematic. I'm not sure how excited they would be with changing that every year. They're at, what they're doing. And so I just have to remind you of that it is an interlocal agreement. So if it continues to change, we're going to have to change that interlocal agreement every time.
Counselor Hoffmeyer?
So I think what I was understanding there is that setting it to some certain percent would be better? Okay.
Well, I'm just all yes. I'm the yes person. But, it's great to have this conversation. It's normally ended in a kind of a quiet response to a letter saying, we're not interested in increasing it. So I'm happy to see that you're appreciative of the work we're doing jointly, and we'll continue to do that. And my understanding is going to 1% would just be a $50,000 to $67,000 increase, depending on the year,
Yeah, we're estimating next year would be 67,000
instead of 20.
instead of 20, because we're estimating our 1% is 87,000. So the increase would be 67,000.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel like it's undercutting every other organization to some degree. If you have, I don't know what total you have to award, about
About 300,000.
300,000 this year. I'm not here to ask questions, I'm here to answer, sorry.
So I think unless we have more questions, we'll conclude this then and take it back to our staff. Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, we'll move on to our next item B under Finance, Business Licenses Update. Looks like we have our Finance Director, David Goldman. Mr. Goldman?
Yes, I'm here. I'm about to share my screen and get this thing going. All right, can everybody see that? Perfect.
Yes.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, David Goldman, Finance Director. So today we'll go over the business license services fees. Next slide. So the agenda for this presentation will be to talk a little bit about the background, the updates since the transition to the state system went live, available fee structures, the rational nexus for economic development purposes and some options to consider, and potential economic development activities, and then we'll request the council provide some direction to staff. So a little bit of background. Per Washington state law, all cities were required to partner with the Washington State Department of Revenue Business License Service for business licenses. 2 years ago, back in August, the City Council authorized an agreement with the state's business license service for business license issuance and renewal. In December of 2021, after being presented with license structure options, the City Council adopted an updated business license fee schedule at a flat $40. I mentioned at the time the council. We'll be able to come back before the City Council with updated scenarios. And in March of last year, the city went live with the transition to the business license service. So here's the last 5 years of revenues from the business license fees. You can see that it was pretty steady at 50,000 until last year. The first year went live, and that was primarily due to what they told us would happen. There was additional compliance. Folks who were going in the state system to register with the state on their state business license were then being told, oh, by the way, there's a local business license that you have to register for as well. So folks who might not have known about that were then registering for the local business license, and that increased the amount of revenues by about $9,000. So some of the available fee structures that I went over last time, just go over again, are a flat fee. You can determine the fees by gross income. You can determine it by employee count, either a flat or a range. You can do a combination of gross income or employee count, or perhaps some other combination. All the different structures that over 200 cities have adopted can be found online at the Department of Revenue website. That's on your screen and also in the packet. So here are some examples of those structures. The first one here is from Burlington. This is determined by the gross income of the business. Under 2,000, there's no charge. From 2,000 to 20,000, it's $50. From 20,000 to 100,000, it's $75. And if the gross income's over 100,000, it's $100. This is an example of an employee count range. If the business has between 0 and 10 employees, it's $81. This is City of Federal Way. If it's between 11 and 25 employees, 126. 26 and 50 employees, 251. And then it just continues to go up until the last category is if a business has more than 500 employees, the annual business license is $9,500. Over in Mukilteo, if a business has no employees, the base is $100. 1 to 3 employees, $150. And if it has 4 and over, it's that $150 plus $60 for each additional employee. A capped example, this is Chilean. 1 to 3 employees, it's $50. 4 to 26 employees, it's $50 plus $15 per employee. And if the business has over 27 employees, the cap is $410. This is a combination of employee count and gross income. This is City of Kirkland. If it's between 0 and 20,000, there's no fee. If it's above 20,000, it's a $100 base plus $130 per employee. So we looked at 16 different cities. Some are comparable, some are just, we were trying to find different structures for you. And this is all in your backup. But you can see that, the cities are located on the left side. And we have the 2021 population from the Office of Financial Management in the next column. Then we have the 2021 business license revenues from the state auditor. That was the latest data that was available. And there were some cities that we had to go back to 2020 on the revenues. There was 3 cities with the star next to them on the left column. And then the middle column, you have the 2021 general fund revenues. And from there, we divided the business license revenues by the general fund and by population, just to kind of try to put things on a more even playing field so you can do an easier comparison, because some cities are bigger than others. And based on this chart, the average of those 16 cities, it's about, business licenses bring in about 1.1% of the general fund. And on a per capita basis, the average is about $12.74 per capita. I bolded Oak Harbor. You can see that we're in the lower end of the scale there. 0.3% of the general fund and $2 per capita. And from a rank point of view, out of this group, we're the lowest. We're the lowest of the group. The next slide shows that same data on a bar chart. So you can see here that Linwood is by far the largest out of this group. 4.3% of their general fund is business licenses. And Oak Harbor is down here at 0.3 with a red circle. And you could kind of take a look at some of these other cities, how they compare. I think the average was 1.1%. And then from a per capita perspective, again, Linwood is just blowing everybody out of the water at that $62. Chelen's pretty high there too. But there's Oak Harbor, we're $2 per capita, and here's what the other cities look like on a per capita basis, and I think the average was about $12.74. So I'll talk a little bit about economic development. Steve McCaslin, our economic development coordinator, presented to the joint city council and planning board a couple months ago. I'll just summarize kind of what he said and what I took away from that presentation. So economic development is, he was talking about how money works for local economies. So money leaks out of the local economy, and the primary businesses, they fill up the local economy back with some of that money. Businesses can be divided into 2 categories. Ones that contribute to the local economy, the primary ones, that means bringing money from outside the area into the area. And then you have the secondary businesses which consume that money, or basically recirculate that money that's brought in. And the majority of your businesses in any economy will be secondary. So to improve the local economy, the goal is to create more primary industry jobs. And economic development is that process to improve the strength of that local economy. So there are 3 basic economic development programs. You have business retention, you have business attraction, and you have business incubation. And all 3 of those require resources. So in order to develop a quality and resilient economic development program, a new recurring source of funding will need to be identified above and beyond what the city currently generates for its current services and operations. And the rational nexus between business licenses and economic development is, since economic development benefits the local economy, including the vast majority of businesses, which are secondary businesses, business licenses make sense to be used as a funding mechanism for those 3 economic development programs, which will in turn generate more money for the local economy, which benefits everybody, including those secondary businesses. So it could be thought of as an investment. So with that, I put some options together as promised last year. I used the most recent data that we have and throw some options together and show the council what those options generate. So The first option, I decided to just use an employee count with tiers with an overall cap. So there's 4 tiers, and tier 1 would be a company with under 10 employees. So the business license fee would be a $50 minimum, $10 per employee. So 10 times 10 is 100. The max for that tier would be 100. The next tier would be between 11 and 50 employees. It would go up to $40 an employee, plus the $100 from the previous tier. So the max for that tier would be $1,700. The next tier would be between 51 and 100 employees, and that would be $50 per employee in that tier. And of course, you'd add the $1,700 from the previous tier. And the max for tier 3 would be $4,200, and that would be the cap. If any company has over 100 employees, the cap would be $4,200. And what that looks like is on this slide over here. The number of businesses that we have in our database that would fall within tier 1 is about the majority. 90% of the businesses fall within tier 1. The average gross income is about $886,000. The average license that we calculated with that previous formula, the previous slide, was about $52.46 a year. Now, when I take the amount over the $50 base, $2.46, and divide by their gross income, it basically rounds down to 0. I'm just trying to figure out, like, what would be a good benchmark to take a look at. And I thought, well, what does that license cost divided by the company's gross income, just to kind of get a sense, where it falls. And then you can see with tier 2, we have 170 companies with an average gross of 2.1 million. The average license is about $478, and you take that, divide by that, you get about 0.2% of the gross, or what is that, like 1/50th, right? 1/50th of a percent. And then the next tier, there's only 8 companies that fall into that tier. And when you do that division, the average license would be about 2,900, and that's about 1/20th of a percent. And there's 14 businesses in the last tier. And when you do, that would be a flat 4,200, and you do that division, that's a 0.03% of a percent. So statistics are the minimum is 50, the max is 4,200. The average is $135 per year, and the additional business license revenues generated from this option to be used for economic development would be $176,000 a year. Option 2 was based on gross income instead of employees. So there's 5 tiers here, and we can just, the maximum you can do is 5 tiers for the state. We can do less tiers, or we can change the tiers around, but with this scenario, with gross income under $20,000, $50 minimum, that would be $50. And then if the gross income is between $20,000 and $100,000, $75. Between $100,000 and $200,000, $100. $200,000 to $500,000, $250. And then if the gross income's over $500,000, $500 would be the cap. And then the next slide shows how that looks. It's a little bit more spread out than the previous option. The top is, the top's assumed to be 0. The data showed either 0 or perhaps it was unknown at the time from the state. That's about 374 businesses, and the base would be $50. The next tier, the average gross income is $6,000, and that would also be $50 because that's the first tier. And this division here is whatever's over 50, so obviously 50 minus 50 is 0. And then we're talking about the next tiers here. We have 366 businesses. Average license is about $75. That's 1/20th of 1%. Tier 3, about 137 businesses. Average license is $100. That's 1/20th. That's 0.04%, or I guess that's 1/25th of a percent. And tier 4 is 151 businesses, $250 a year, and that's a 0.6 of a percent. And then finally, the last category, 256 businesses would fall into that. The average gross income is $8 million. That license is $500, and that's 1/100th of a percent. And that would also bring in about the same as option 1, about $180,000 here. And the average business license would be $137.10. And then the final option that I put together is just a flat amount. Right now, the flat amount's 40. But with all these options, I just figured we'll move the flat amount to 50. So if we were to do that, this would be everybody paying that 50, whether it's a small company with low gross earnings or low employees or a larger company. So if everybody paid 50, the city would generate about $18,000 more. If everybody paid 75, about $65,000 more, and so on until you get to $150 flat amount, that would generate $200,000 more. And these percentages here are just the flat amounts here divided by the average gross income. So you can see that it's pretty small when you look at the entire average. So that's option 3. And the next to last slide here, I just put together, I figured, if I was being asked to increase a fee or increase a tax, I'd like to know possibly what we can be using the money for, in a more immediate terms, as opposed to kind of something that is going to be coming down the pike in the next few years. So here's some ideas that I work with some folks here at the city to provide to the council for just for your review. Got a downtown and marina revitalization and redevelopment plan, that triangle that our public works director presented, I think last month. This money could fund phase 2 of that program and potential future phases. In addition, the funding can fund economic and real estate analysis and assessments, business retention and expansion programs, business attraction programs, business incubation type programs, and site development as well when we get to that stage. So those are some of the things that we can sequester the money for and use in the future. And with that, I turn it back to City Council to deliberate and provide direction to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. I thought I really used to like numbers. And now I'm thinking that you have a real love for numbers.
Well, I just love trying to take numbers and make them make sense.
Yeah.
Instead of just providing like a sheet with numbers that are just hard to follow and hard to read and understand, I like to use them in a way that provides a story that actually informs people so that they can have better information when they're making tough decisions or providing direction to staff or the public. So yeah.
Well, I'll turn this to council now, but I'm sure I'm going to have some more questions myself. So first, Councilor Stuckey.
Put on the business owner hat here. So I really like this idea. I'm pretty firm on liking option 2. I don't think a flat rate is the most equitable. I don't like the idea based on employees because that penalizes those businesses that have low profit margins but high levels of employees. Case in point, McDonald's. McDonald's is still a franchise, even though a lot of people think of it as a corporation, but you have some place like a restaurant with a very small profit margin with tons of employees. Also, for someone like myself, I have 1 or 2 people on the payroll who I call maybe once a year if I use them, maybe. Would I be counting those as employees towards that total? Who knows? When it comes to gross income, though, I just renewed my business license. It was so very easy. It didn't ask a lot of questions. Just, what's your gross income? I looked in QuickBooks, I typed in my gross income, and away I went. My business would be in Tier 5. Would $500 be much of an impact to me? No. It would not. And if you have a little shop on Pioneer that isn't doing so well, doesn't have a lot of money, your business license would be going up by $10 since we're still at $40. I do get the headline with the $500 at the top. All of a sudden, City Council increases business license tenfold. I get the optics of that. But coming from somebody whose business does gross over $500,000, $500 would be pretty minimal to my operations. My only caveat would be what that money is used for. We need to be real specific about that. We need to not be willy-nilly about what that money is used for and have it just go into a pot. We need to be specific that it's for economic development, either that is brought before our economic development person to make proposals to us, or there's a committee to use that for economic development. I just want to make sure that money is used wisely, not for something that barely has anything to do with economic development. So for me, option 2, I would have no issue with as a business owner, and I think it's a right decision as a council member.
Councilor Hoffmeyer?
Yeah, like option 2 myself as well. You know, it's funny, the business owners that I've talked with, pretty much were sitting there right with Brian, and not so much as option 1, 2, or 3, because we're seeing that today, but to have the goal of intentional economic development, to hire an economic development coordinator. Now, we've known that it's going to take some money to actually have that intentional economic development, and I think that's the part that excites the average business owner. Like Councilor Stuckey said, you know, the $500 wouldn't have that much of an impact on his business, but some of the growth that could come out of this program really would. So I too support it because of the intentional economic development that we can drive out of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hoffmeyer. Anyone else? Oh,
Councilmember Wiesner has his hand
great.
raised, Mayor.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and yes, thank you for the great presentation, David, and thank you for the love of numbers. You know, I could have sat there and tried to do all those calculations in my head, but it probably would have hurt. So, option 2 certainly appeals to me just from the standpoint that it's the, you know, it takes, you know, I like the honor system all and well, right? When it comes to stating your number of employees, but it's becomes a non-verifiable, right? It becomes a situation where somebody who wants to be dishonest, there really is no repercussion, right? Because it's a lot harder to verify employee numbers than it is gross income numbers, because of course we get to see the gross income numbers based upon sales tax revenues, and we can actually go in and obviously look at individual businesses in town and be able to you know, see if they're fudging a little bit. And I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to do that. I think we have better things to do with our time, but at the same time it does become a verifiable process, and it keeps everybody on an even kilter, right? It makes it so that, you know, people who need to be paying what they need to be paying are doing that, and we don't end up basically creating another non-enforceable regulation, rule, or fee, where the people who are willing to not be forthcoming and honest benefit, and the people who are forthcoming and honest don't, right? And so just from that standpoint, you know, I like it based upon the gross income, because again, it's something verifiable. And again, it's something that doesn't deter from somebody hiring additional employees. You know, let's face it, there are people who would look at that small increase in fee and maybe hold off on an employee hire. I don't know why they would do that, but there are people out there, I'm sure, that do it. I guess my only input is, you know, whether or not you might want to play with the numbers a little bit more, just because I guess I'm bringing it up in the fact that seems to me like 20,000 and under is kind of a pretty low number. You know, that's not much of a business generating, you know, less than $2,000 worth of revenue a month. I certainly don't want to have an impact on that small shop downtown, you know, where, you know, husband and wife are down there working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, you know, and they're barely getting by, and, you know, maybe doing $3,000 a month or something. I don't think the $25, you know, a year is going to kill them. But again, I just, you know, the tiers, you know, from a business owner standpoint, you know, I just don't know there's a lot of businesses that are going to be under that $20,000 number. I know you put it up there on a chart, and you have that info. How many number of businesses? Let me move my little thing here. I got covering it.
Yeah, it's 569, and then we have another 374, which I guess they were waiting on the renewals to get the data from. So
yeah, so you know, we've got 1,000 people here, I guess, that were, yeah.
The license is currently 40, So that proposal's just bringing it up $10.
Yeah, so I get that. Maybe you and I will get together and talk a little more about, but my option two's the way I'm leaning. I think it's the fairest way to do it. It ties to a gross income, and I agree totally with what Councilmember Stuckey says. We don't want to have an effect upon, low margin businesses that hire a lot of employees. And that's why I don't like the employee based, along with this is more accountable and everybody knows we have access to this information. So the tendency is to going to be a little more forthcoming when filling out your business license. So, but certainly appreciate the time, David. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Yes, Councilor Wittgenstein.
Yeah, I think all of the options are great. I too also agree with the option two. As a business owner, I don't quite make tier 5, but I am in tier 3. And $100 wouldn't impact me annually in my business, right? The numbers were interesting to see how many different tiers within the option two, how many different tiers of options we already have in our community with our businesses. And as part of economic development, I agree that this money needs to be, how do we help those smaller businesses grow their businesses even more if possible? And I'm sure that's part of what we're doing already, but to be able to continue to do that work beyond when this contract is up that we have currently would be an amazing thing. So option 2 would be my preference as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Stuckey? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you, Councilor Munt? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure where this fits in. I remember with a past finance director, he would write down in a little notebook if there was a gun show at Best Western, on what date, to know how much they were selling so that the city would get their sales tax. And I don't know, so they would have to have a business license to have that gun show or gyms or, whatever, and then to be able to collect the money. And if he didn't hear back, he could ask the state auditors, on this date, there was this was the name of the company, or this was the business, and they had like a 2-day show. And I just want to be sure our city gets its fair share of the sales tax. So that would be, then that's an income thing. I don't know how that works.
Oh, yeah, I did that. Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I actually, I think there was a car sales in a tent a few months ago, and I did that very thing to make sure we were getting our money. So, sorry to interrupt.
No, and then you have it's the Kirby guy, and there were some college kids selling steak knives, and they would go door to door. And technically, they were supposed to be having a Oak Harbor City business license to be able to do that. And so I'm just, I like to see everything fair. You've done a tremendous amount of work. It looks like option 2 is probably the best at this point. But I also know that we qualify as a low-income city, even though we have X amount of population, because the mean average income for the state is about $20,000 more than what people actually make if you take all the average incomes here on the island. So I'm trying to balance. I see what you're doing, and I also know where our county is, and I don't know if we're still that low from the state average income. And then
We're definitely lower. I remember looking at it last year. We're definitely that sounds about right. Maybe it's only 15,000 lower, but I do remember it is lower than the average.
And I'm not sure. I'm not a numbers person. I'm just a people person and want things to be fair. So I don't know how that also plays into the numbers. It's got to be fair. We can't give things away, and we have to support the programs that we have to support our citizens. So I'm just tossing it out there. It's probably spaghetti that doesn't always stick to the ceiling, right?
Thank you, Councilor Munns. Councilor Stuckey.
I'm gonna guess the answer is no, and it's a lot harder number to get to. But like going back to my business, I may be tier 5. However, it's not a high net profit line of work. I mean, same thing with restaurants. Restaurants have a notorious low net profit. Is there any way to do this on net as opposed to gross?
Yeah, that's a good question, but they only collect the gross
Okay.
at the state level. Yeah.
I thought that might, because the bummer is, I mean, you have businesses that may gross really high, but net really low. It's not always, one does not always equal the other. So I didn't think that was the case, and that's a much harder number to come to, especially if you're not a very savvy business person.
Well,
but
I think I heard, during the legislative session, there was a whole bunch of bills that didn't make it past the finish line. I think one of those was to change some kind of tax. Like there's some cities have a B&O tax. I think the state has a B&O tax and other taxes. They were talking about possibly changing that from being based on gross income to net income, perhaps. So once the state, if that ever gets adopted and the state goes in that direction, then they'll probably start collecting that data. But as of now, I don't know if there's an incentive for the state to collect the net as opposed to the gross, because the gross ties into other stuff related to the state.
sure, and net is a much harder number to get to, but, net is a little more fair in some ways. So that's all. Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Very good presentation, Mr. Goldman. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Development Services section of our agenda, countywide planning policy. And with us today is our principal planner, Kat Kamak. Kat?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, members of the City Council. Kat Kamak, Principal Planner. Here to discuss countywide planning policies. This is a document that we share with the county, with other jurisdictions in the county. So what I thought I could do is have a brief presentation for the council just to get updated on the countywide planning policies, a little story of where it came from, where it started, what do we cover in terms of scope, and what are some of the things that we're hoping to tackle currently. So if you give me a moment, I will share my screen and jump into a short presentation. All right. Okay, so I hope you can see that.
Yes, we can.
So the countywide planning policies is a document that's adopted by the county and by the jurisdictions within it. Let me see if I can move my slideshow. I hope it does. All right. Okay. So the countywide planning policies, they are sometimes referred to as CWPP, which is how we refer to in our document that we adopted in Island County. They are also referred to as CPP at the state level. And so I just wanted to make sure that the council is aware that those two acronyms stand for the same document. It's just used differently in the county and in the state. There were some attachments that I had to the council's packet. That's material and literature from the Department of Commerce regarding some recent House bills that impact our countywide planning policies, and they refer to these policies as CPP. So I didn't want the council to get confused between the two. They are one and the same for us. So the origins for such a document comes from our Growth Management Act, and the first countywide planning policy document for Island County was adopted in 1992, and it has been amended several times in 98 and 99, 2015 and 2017. So this is a kind of living document and changes with the time, and to provide consistency between all the jurisdictions. So what do the countywide planning policies, what are they required to do? So these are policies that are supposed to be developed with the cooperation of municipalities within each county. Again, these are the statements from RCWs. The written policies establish a county-wide framework for how all the jurisdictions develop their comprehensive plans. And this is done mainly to make sure that all jurisdictions are consistent with each other moving forward. They're intended to provide for a medium of cooperation between the governmental agencies and to prevent redundant and conflicting actions. They're also intended to promote contiguous and orderly development. So there's a lot of conversation we usually have, intent to expand UGA boundaries or to change JPA boundaries. These are best actually done through the countywide planning policies and the development of those because that's the medium of communication best to address most of those issues. So what does our current countywide planning policies cover? They have, if you look at the document, they have some general planning goals. They have some policies. The policies are very particular to some topics. They address joint planning area. They address the urban growth area. They address other issues in the county, rural development in the county. They also address transportation issues, housing, economic development, and so on. So these are broad policies to talk about these specific sort of elements that constitute Island County. The document also has some administration and implementation statements, basically how to consider amendments to the document. And it also lays out, population projections and land capacity information, things to make the billable lands analysis that usually counties do a little more consistent across all jurisdictions because there's some common understanding between all of them in the countywide planning policies. So these are sections and information that are contained in the current document. The current document also has a billable lands procedure. This is again, it came from many of the amendments that were done in the previous countywide planning policies, is to establish a process by which you assess how much billable land there is in each community, which again determines how much it should grow, what should the UGA size be, and so on. So this is a critical document that has a way to influence all of those topics. So as you may all know, we update our comprehensive plan in a cycle every 8 or 9 years. Our next major update is coming up for 2025. And so in preparation of that major update, what you want to do is to make sure that the current countywide planning policies are up to date and that all the information that's contained in there is as current as possible so that when you do the major update and when you do the buildable lands analysis, you're hopefully working off of the most recent information or the most recent agreeable information. So the document, the countywide planning policy, has a chapter in there to specifically a process identified to how to amend these. And one of the steps it includes creating a countywide technical group of staff members from all the jurisdictions to start looking at the countywide planning policies and suggest any changes that are necessary as we go into the major update. And so that is currently what a staff from the various jurisdictions have done with the county. We've just recently formed this group about 2-3 months ago and started to look at the document and start to look at what are some of the things that need to be amended. There are also some state requirements from the state that have come down through the passage of various House bills that require some changes to the countywide planning policies. And so we have to consider those as well. And so This meeting primarily is just to bring the council up to date on the countywide planning policies, the existence of such a document, get familiar with it. And I'm hoping over the next 2 to 3 months, in collaboration with other jurisdictions in Allen County and with Allen County, we will come forward with some things to look at in order to consider amending the current plan, the current planning policies. So we may have a couple of meetings on this, and this is just the starting. Just wanted to introduce the topic and get the council familiar with it. So what is it that we're kind of looking at in the current scope? So we're looking at some terminology, trying to make some consistencies. Again, this document is all about consistency. So there are some terminologies that are different in the county comprehensive plan that is different in the countywide planning policies. So trying to align them will be helpful for everybody. So we're looking at some terminology adjustments. We're looking at whether there are any amendments to the billable lands procedures. And some of the things to look at is whether historic properties should be taken out of those analysis. And then we're also looking at some of the adjustment factor. So an adjustment factor, basically, it's in the countywide planning policies at the very end in the appendix section in terms of how, what are the percentages that we can discount from development when we consider the development of land analysis. So for example, if we say, we have 7,000 single family lots in Oak Harbor, just because Oak Harbor allows for accessory dwelling units, it doesn't mean that all 7,000 lots will have accessory dwelling units, even though our code allows it. There are physical constraints, there are other homeowners association constraints, and maybe many other constraints that prevents every lot from having an accessory dwelling unit. So what you do is you assign some of these adjustment factors to take a certain percentage out of the inventory in the calculation. So by averaging those out, you hopefully determine what actual capacity that you have in your city. So these adjustment factors need to be amended or updated because Oak Harbor specifically has changed some of its density provisions and lot sizes in the last couple years. And so those adjustment factors could be skewed if you use the old numbers. So we're asking for some updates on that. So those are some things that are just been brought up for discussion. Population is one of the big things that is usually called out in the countywide planning policies because that needs to be consistent across the county. The state has passed a bill that requires all the counties to account for affordable housing in each of the jurisdictions, and there's very specific methodology in how we should do this. Some of this information, a couple of documents have been attached to your workshop report to give you some information on what we are dealing with as planners, give you an idea of that. In terms of the state is asking us to provide very specific targets for housing units over the next 20 years for very specific income categories. And so it's a very detailed allocation. And the state is asking every county to allocate its share of affordable housing or housing units that it needs to target over the next 20 years. And then the county needs to disperse this among the various jurisdictions within it in a certain proportion or in a certain methodology. And that's what the method A and method B is. It's a choice. It's a county choice, or it's the entire county's choice, not just Island County. It's all the jurisdictions with it. It must choose which method, A or B, best suits for Island County. And so staff, this technical committee is looking at that currently to find the best way to, what would be the best way to allocate these housing distribution in Long Island County. So if you are interested in that information, please look at the pamphlets that I've included along with the packet. If you have ideas, if you want to talk more about it, feel free to give me a call or stop by my office and chat about it. It seems there's a lot of percentages and there's spreadsheets to work out. It seems complicated at first, but once you kind of get into the details, you can try and see what the state is trying to provide as options. And I'm hoping at the next touch point at the City Council on this topic that I would be able to bring back some actual numbers and some spreadsheets to show you what a distribution would look like in the county based on method A or method D. And then we probably will need your kind of action on which methodology best suits Oak Harbor, and then Langley will do the same thing, and Cookville will do the same thing, and it'll all go to Island County, and then Island County will have to adopt this countywide planning policies for the county. So it's a long kind of method, but every jurisdiction has to have a say in how that works. That's how you bring, that's the requirement of the countywide planning policies, is that we all have a say in how these work. So these are some of the major changes that the staff are currently working on. I'll have more information and more details on it. There are some other minor corrections we're also looking at, and I will try and bring all of these details to the City Council as soon as I have like a first draft of what we're considering. We'll come to a workshop and we'll take a look at it. One of the things that was brought to our attention is the interlocal agreement. Even though it's not part and parcel of the countywide planning policies, they have connections in terms of populations. So the countywide planning policy gives us a guidance in terms of what population, middle or low or high that we should choose from, which is what all jurisdictions then use in their respective comprehensive plans. So these are then reflected in interlocal agreements for implementation. The interlocal agreement that Oak Harbor has with Island County is very outdated, and populations in those agreements are very outdated as well. So all of that information is likely needing an update. So I have a feeling that the interlocal agreement will also be a topic that the council will have to consider shortly in updating that. So these are some of the things that are likely coming forward to council in the next few months as and when information is available. So just wanted to be in front of it and give the council information on this topic as we move to the rest of the year, trying to tackle some of these amendments. So with that, I will turn it back to the council for questions or comments.
Thank you, CAC. Mr. Olborn, did you have a?
Yeah, if I can just kind of follow up here before we go to the council here with just some staff updates here, and I appreciate Mr. Kamak's expertise in this area and working with the county, and like he said, just to add to it, one of the areas that I want to really focus on is updating that interlocal agreement. It has to do with how they handle homes in the urban growth area, and they're supposed to be under our jurisdiction. And I know our city attorneys looked at it and really advised us to make that a priority, to update it, because it's just really outdated and doesn't really meet the requirements. And even the outdated one, I know about 4 instances where the county went ahead and provided opportunity for people to grow to do new housing or new buildings without going through the city. If they're in the urban growth area, they're still under our jurisdiction and our requirements. So we want to make sure that we increase that relationship, that we don't have situations in the future where they accidentally allow building permits to be issued and expansion of, it deteriorates from our opportunity to expand water and sewer. We could have two of those homes, we could have forced the annexation and put them on city water and city sewer, certainly more environmentally friendly than continuing to do well water and septic. So there's certainly an environmental aspect in that too, and like he would kind of, just to sum it up, it does tie to affordable housing, and the more property that we get, for opportunity for expansion, increasing our urban growth area will bring up the supply. So there is an interest there in expanding it. I know we've been in a tug of war last 8 years ago when we did it, and I think we even had a lawsuit with the county and lost on that issue. But hopefully we'll start with a better relationship. And I know the county's we wanted to do the joint planning area up front, and the county's kind of been hesitant to do that. And unfortunately, when we did put it on their docket in 2019, but in preparation, this is all in preparation of the comprehensive plan. We're all having to update our comprehensive plan in 2025. So I'm really excited that this is coming forward, and we have an opportunity to increase some opportunities and help with affordability here in Oak Harbor and in the Whidbey Island.
Okay, I'll take it to council now. Councilor Munz.
Thank you, Mayor. Well said, Mr. Oborn. Seems really hard to get the county to participate, and I really like the angle of maybe through an attorney helping us push the correct language and stuff, but it has caused lot of headaches and I guess unsupervised county action, I guess, that isn't what the city has planned. So, but thank you.
Councilor Wiesner?
Yes.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for that presentation, CAC. And then Blaine hit on this, I'm most excited about the conversation about the joint planning area. The joint planning area obviously isn't a, guaranteed area that the city's going to expand to, or doesn't mean that the city's going to grow and that we're going to build 1 million houses or anything, but the joint planning area is exactly that. It's an area that we have designated where the county and the city plan together. And those areas should be, around our city and around the area of influence. And of course, the city has grown significantly inside the joint planning area since it was designated in 1999. So it's been 24 years since we've revisited that joint planning area. And, a perfect example was the recent work with, the land trust, purchasing them some land just south of the city limits and going through that process. City was, kind of brought on that at the very end, and it wasn't really, involved at the beginning like they most likely should have been. And joint planning area is going to be what's going to keep us in the county working together, as the city continues to grow. There's an old saying, of course, that you're not going to stop growth, right? But we certainly can control it, and we can all have input on it, and we can do it logically. And that means working together hand in hand with the county. So I'm hoping these conversations are going to, facilitate that conversation about the joint planning area. The mayor sent a letter to Island County, I think it was in 2019. So it's been 4 years. Asking for that conversation. I know we've kind of gently asked a couple of times since then, and I think we've been really patient on trying to get the conversation started. And I'm glad to hear that this is going to facilitate that conversation and give us all the opportunity to figure out what direction is the city going to grow, and how can us and the county work together on making future plans for that. So that it's not haphazard growth, but it's logical and planned growth. So excited, and then thanks for that presentation, CAC.
Absolutely. Just want to clarify for folks that don't know, that the UGA for the city of Oak Harbor has not changed since the adoption of the comprehensive plan with GMA. So none of these boundaries have actually changed. The original UGA that was adopted with the very first comprehensive plan is the UGA that we have today. The changes that were proposed back, I think, in 2005 were contested by the county, and that's what the lawsuit that Blaine was referring to, the city lost. So the only changes that we attempted to make to our UGA were lost just because, primarily because of process, not because that we didn't need the land or we couldn't use it. It was just the process of things were done. So working through the countywide planning policies and looking at these numbers, I think these housing allocation that the state is requiring us to do is going to be very telling of how and where, what areas of the county should and should not grow in order to meet these targets. And that is going to bring up very interesting policy questions for both the county and the city. So I think this is the document that will establish the foundation for a lot of what we do as we go forward and update our comp plan, whether we expand UGA or whether changes happen to the JPA. A lot of it is very critical on how this document develops. So I think it's very important to look at it, even though it's just a policy document. It does set the roadmap for us for future things.
Thanks again, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Interesting segue here, and maybe it's because 5 o'clock's approaching. I would love to see an organizational chart someday of comparing a football team to city government. You know, I think if that were to exist, you know, and I wish Councilor Marshall was here, he'd know, but I think if that were to exist, maybe the mayor's the general manager, maybe Blaine's the coach. I'm not sure. Entertain me for a second. Anyway, you know, quite often you'll hear council say things like they want our relationship with the county to improve, or they want to work with the county to expand that JPA or the UGA, et cetera. So, I mean, for the city administrator is the one that directs staff, you know, great job on getting things like this moving. For that to happen, you know, we'll give some casual directive and it sounds easy. But for that to happen, you know, there's a there's a necessary codification of a language to get there. You know, there's a science and an arithmetic behind it to make it all happen. And CAC, I don't know if you're the one that threw the ball or caught the ball. I don't know. Good job, great job. You know, the fact that you're able to do this all while being a new dad, you're a rock star, and the fact that you seem to enjoy your job does show. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Yes, Councilor Wittgenstein.
Yes, excellent report. Thank you so much. And that's all I really want to jump in there and say is just, I really appreciate the information. It's insightful.
Okay. Thank you. Again, CAC, we'll move on to a very patient Police Captain Tony Slowick has been standing with us here ever since this meeting got started. We're going to the Police Department Action Item Project 25, Compliancy and Equipment Purchase. Captain Slowick, welcome.
We have Chief Drusker joining us remotely. I'm here to talk about Project 25, compliance and equipment, and what that means is our radio frequency and upgrading our radio equipment. So a little background is that our first responder agencies, that's all police, fire, and EMS, utilize ICOM 911 as our sole regional dispatch center. ICOM provides and manages our technical support to our LAM mobile radios, does all the improvements, maintains the towers, repeaters, and licensing. The current radio infrastructure does not meet federal Project 25 standards for secure communication, encryption, key management, location services, and equipment authentication. Current Department of Homeland Security and FEMA grant recipients are required to comply with P25 standards when purchasing LMR equipment. So what is Project 25? What is this? This is a national standard for radio equipment. It's a best practices, and it is a directive to all the equipment manufacturers out there. And it develops standards for interoperability between LMR, land mobile radio equipment, standardizes equipment compatibility across different brands, converts existing analog radio channels to digital channels, which is what we're trying to do here, allows for broadband integration, improved clarity and expanded coverage, which is a future capability, what we would get. Supports secure communication through the use of encryption. There's the fancy AES bit set there. Ability to carry IP data for advanced applications for future growth as well, and allows us to start implementing location services as well, so for officer safety for radio communications. So this project provides many benefits, including improved officer safety, improved interoperability with partner agencies, including federal agencies and future grant opportunities. I'll say that we have had some issues in the last year where we've worked with Department of Homeland Security agents where they operate on a digital frequency with encryption, and we are operating on an analog frequency from 1980s that hasn't been upgraded. So that is it gets to be some challenging things, and carrying multiple radios and is an officer safety concern, definitely. I want to express that Chief Dresker believes the key benefit is the ability to encrypt communication, so it cannot be intercepted by a third party. This is crucial for police and tactical teams where interception of their communications could give away their position, other key operational details, and disrupt police response during critical events. Often in our community, you think maybe that's not a big deal, but frequently we have people posting real time whatever is transmitted over the radio, which may not be the whole scenario. A lot of times that's a snippet of what the officer may or may not know, what's put out by dispatch, and that gets relayed to our community. The latest thing where we saw this impact was where we had, during the school year at the high school, there was a swatting call where somebody called in a false claim of an active shooter in the school. We locked the school down. We did all the appropriate measures as we're clearing the school, because that radio traffic is unencrypted and goes over the airwaves, and people listen to our radio frequencies with scanners all the time. That's put out through Facebook, that's put out through different social media sites, and we had parents responding to the high school, which impacts the safety of the officers, the safety of the school, and the ability for us to get that school back into normal operations. So funding. So the total cost of this project is $78,529. The police department secured $28,000 so far for this project, and we've requested additional funding of the remainder amount through the ARPA funds to make the purchase. If additional ARPA funds are not available, the remaining costs will be taken from the current 2023 police budget. One consideration is, since we started getting the actual quotes back, from March till July, the cost of equipment has gone up 10%, and the delay in equipment has continues to grow because of the availability of parts. So the recommendation we're asking for is that you move to authorize staff to proceed with the ICOM's procurement of the Oak Harbor Police Department Radio P25 Improvement Project in the amount of $78,529. So
Thank you, Captain. Before I take it to council here, want to make sure that we've got no input from our public.
That's correct.
Want to make sure there's nobody here that would like to have input. So none from the public, nobody here. We'll then turn to council. Councilor Wittgenstein.
Thank you, Captain. I'm in favor of getting us upgraded. We're still using antiquated systems from 1980. I used to run around with people in town listening to those systems. So absolutely, as I follow the threads through social media, there's real time, like within minutes of events happening, being posted all over. And it's not just the safety of our police officers, but it's the public safety of our community as well. And I think this is a good step, and I'm in all favor for it.
Councilor Munns.
Thank you, Mayor. Captain Slowick or Chief Dressler, if you have to use the budget money, if there aren't enough ARPA funds to fully fund this, what will be missing from the police budget between now and the end of the year?
So I
I mean,
believe-
that's kind of $50,000 is.
Yeah, I believe I can
$50,000.
answer that.
Okay.
Chief and I have had that conversation. We believe the money is already in the budget. We have had some staffing shortages, and we've been able to hire people or bring them, offer them conditional offer employment pending an academy without having to bring them into, onboard them into the department, which has saved us some money, and we believe we have the funds available because of the staffing.
And you're still able to pay for the academy for them?
That's correct. It's because the academy delay is about 8 months.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully, the couple people that we've had have had secure jobs, and they've been comfortable in their job. It doesn't disrupt their home life. They want to stay where they're at. So we waited to onboard them for several months before bringing them, before sending them to the academy.
Well, this seems like a very, very important item that we need to have and should be fully funded. And I also want to say congratulations on passing the FBI school. That's quite an accomplishment.
Thank you.
Councilor Stuckey.
Just want to make sure I understand. So, my phone, I have a scanner app.
Yep.
Would I not be able to hear anything?
So it depends. If we were digital frequency, just going to digital frequency, you would be able to hear all that. That's just normal scanner traffic. If we encrypt or we go to an encrypted frequency for special events or depending on when that would be, you would not be able to hear encrypted frequencies.
All right, so let me try this a little more plainly. So there's Alert Wavy 2.0 website on Facebook, which is what we're referring to.
Sure.
Having talked to first responders from all backgrounds and my own experience dealing with unattended passings and stuff, it's definitely a love-hate relationship depending upon the department, I'll admit. So with that particular Facebook page, would they still be able to hear the scanner traffic? You're saying if it's encrypted, so is it standardly going to be encrypted or only encrypted in certain events?
So right now.
Tony, let me, if I could step in here, please.
Please, Chief.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So Tony's doing a great job with this. I figured this question would come up, so I'm going to step in here with a quick bit. If we encrypt, then they will not be able to hear it. And I guess I'm just going to say our reason for being on the radio is not for other people's, necessarily for other people to be able to hear it. It's for us to communicate back and forth with ICOM and ourselves. We could cite many different conferences I've been to and different recaps of critical incidents where critical incidents are compromised because the bad guy or girl is on that scanner listening. And most of those agencies, including one in Minnesota that I recently attended a debrief on, an mass shooter or active shooter, those agencies, if they were not encrypted, are quickly after these incidents became encrypted. So it's about us being able to have private communications as we're working through tactical details on domestic violence calls or active shooter calls or whatever those are. If we're encrypted, those sites will not be able to hear it because it will be an encrypted frequency, and that traffic will be encrypted. And that will be up to us to determine that based on where we're at with our radio system at that time, because our purpose is for communications within the police organization for emergency responses and services, not necessarily for other people to be able to hear those communications.
So
Go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
So that initial call from ICOM to the officer, whatever that may be, is that going to be encrypted or not?
Chief, can I answer that?
Yep, it's back to you, Tony. Go ahead. You've been doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Once you're, so there's no way, when you encrypt a frequency, the entire frequency is encrypted all the time. So it's programmed that way into the radio. So if we operate on an encrypted frequency, anything communicated from dispatch, initial call to the end of the call, or anything transmitted by the officer would not be able to be heard by anyone.
And this would be just Oak Harbor PD and not other.
Currently, we are we know that some of our agency partners, Skagit County Sheriff's Department and Anacortes, both have digital frequencies and are planning to go encrypted or use their encrypted capabilities. We would have that on the island. Island County is working, their way through their process. However, there are 11 towers. This project upgrades 3 of those towers, which are the ones that Oak Harbor Police Department and Oak Harbor Fire operate on. Additionally, the location services equipment that gets installed would be able to be used by Oak Harbor Fire Department, so it benefits them as well, and other agencies that use those towers.
Okay. Because, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of it being encrypted, and I like the idea of not all movements being recorded.
I would also like to say that this does not bypass the recorded line that that ICOM is required to have. So they record all the radio communications for public disclosure requests or whatever those cases that the prosecutor needs. All of that still is in place. That does not impact that.
I'm just struggling with the transparency versus too much transparency. Case in point, when the Alert Would Be 2.0 came out, and all of a sudden, and I'm looking at through my world, all of a sudden, people were hearing about all the unattended passings that happened. And it made it look like there was a huge increase in unattended passings because the data was so readily available. When, speaking from experience, it hasn't changed all that much. Just the data has become easier. So I do like the idea of it being encrypted. I like the idea of it not being so open, but I can understand some people who would say we're losing some transparency by doing so, even if that transparency isn't always accurate or all the story. We have to be prepared for that, the backlash on that side as well.
Certainly.
So.
Yeah, I'll say, Councilman, that EMS, fire, all those transmissions would not be encrypted. And if we're just operating digital in the air or clear, not encrypted, then that would be heard by everybody.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councilor Hoffmeyer.
You had me at increased safety and security for sure. Captain, you're doing an amazing job, by the way.
Thank you.
I moved to authorize staff to proceed with ICOM's procurement of the Oak Harbor Police Department Radio P25 improvement project in the amount of $78,529.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other input from council? Any questions? That motion was made by Councilor Hoffmeyer, second by Councilor Wigginstein. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. We got 4 of them here. Do we have? Yep. Okay. Mr. Wiesner has voted yes. Thank you, Captain Slowick.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you too.
So we'll move on to our final agenda item, which is the city administrator's report. Mr. Olborn?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Blaine Olborn, Oak Harbor City Administrator, just kind of giving a recap of some of the key items out of the report here. First of all, under City Administrator, the Fire Department, I attended the hearing there with the hearing examiner for the conditional use permit for the new fire station proposed, the second fire station, and it went so well that the hearing examiner gave us a verbal approval. So we're still waiting for the final approval. And what does that mean? That was the last area we were looking for to purchase the property. So once we get that confirmation written approval, we will start closing on that property. And once we close on that property, then we will proceed with construction and continuing the design there and going into the construction and or the design and bid phase of that contract, and following through with what we promised the voters what we do is we build a new station and staff it. So great progress there. One of the things I'm excited about in my professional association was receiving the credentialed manager designation with the International City County Management Association. So it's a great thing to have, and appreciate the people that congratulated me for that. Moving on to legislative outreach, Island County has preliminary awarded us $1 million for marina dredging. So that's contingent on getting a contract with them, but the preliminary approval is there. We asked for $2 million, but that's a great start there with $1 million, so we appreciate that. And then the other ask that we had for the Rural County Economic Development was the North Whidbey Sewer Expansion Project, and then they wanted further discussion with that to kind of include affordable housing. So more to come on that once we meet with them and kind of figure out. That was started as a industrial sewer expansion, but there is some affordable housing in that area that they want us to be cognizant of and include, and so more to come on that one. Another area we're looking at here is in the marina with the working with the federal government, with the Congress, and then also with the Army Corps. There's just a lot of complexity there, and talking to some specialists there, they really suggest we go to a lobbyist. I know that's something that I've kind of avoided. I've talked to a number of federal lobbyists before, but it looks like there's some gain there, and talking with the mayor, he supports us in that move. But we would like to do a selection committee. There was one that was recommended, and there's 3 other that I've looked at. County uses one, and I've been approached by some other lobbyists there. So I'd like 1 or 2 council members to volunteer to kind of be on that panel to help interview a lobbyist, and then we'll come back with a recommendation of a specific lobbyist, and it'll be anywhere between $3,000 and $7,000 a month. A lot of primarily focus will be on the marina and all the issues that we have there, and we do have our Navy base. We want some support there, and then we have a lot of other areas, and we've been able to get some grant funding without a lobbyist, but I think there's some benefit there to doing that, and it's timely to do that. So I guess right now I'm just offering any council members who want to raise their hand and be on the Wittgenstein, and anyone else? Okay, mine's okay. Thank you. All right, moving on. Economic Development Coordinator, we were just talking about demographics, and so if you go to page 8 to the new updated demographic report, you can see what the incomes are in the city, for the county, and the state are in there. So that was just discussed earlier, so that report's in there. And then also more work on the comprehensive economic development strategy. Our economic development coordinator put out to the council members to participate in that. We're doing kind of a citywide employee kind of staff and council input one for the SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then there's also, we're putting out word to the public that they can also participate with that in the county. EDC has a web page, and they have a consultant that's compiling all that information. So they're collecting information by August 1st, so there's still time to get in that. So I want to plug that. On to development services, pretty exciting there with the Marin Woods subdivision, 21 homes permit applications there. I think 5 to 7 are under construction right now. So a lot of great projects there. 2 new restaurants that were recently occupancy permits on, Cosmic Veggies and Kraken Cove. So good progress, and then more progress on the U-Haul buildings. And then kind of wrapping up here, I think everybody knows the boat ramp opened on July 1st, just in time for the crabbing season. So last minute there, we had our fingers crossed on that one. The center's doing their annual members picnic. I went last year. Great event there. And then certainly was plugged several times here as a National Night Out, August 1st. Moves our council meeting to Wednesday, August 2nd, the next council meeting. And then lastly here, and tying up, is just mentioning Public Works, West Whidbey Avenue project is underway. And then the 2023 paving projects is nearly completed. So a lot of good things happening, and a lot more things in my report that I didn't cover. So I'll take any questions or comments.
Yes, Councilor Munz.
Mr. Oborn, I really, really like when Mikhail sends out your information sharing email. That short bullets, to the point, factual information, that it's great to get that before we get your other report, so, but
Yeah.
thank you, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's part of our threefold, communication there. That's the employee communication that we want to really push out, and I've been urging my leadership to make sure all the employees read that. She does it about biweekly, so that's a good one. And then the council communication is what I just did right now with the city administrator's report, and certainly our communication IT manager works on a lot of communication there for the mayor and the city that's going on. And we're doing the recaps right now for council meetings, so just a lot of great effort there on communication.
Thank you. Mr. Oborn. Yes, Councilor Stuckey?
Did I miss it, or was there not the Development Services Department report this time?
It's not there this time. Once in a while, they just have some staffing issues and didn't get it, but you're right, it's
Okay.
not there, so.
That's
yeah.
all right. I was just making sure. That's one of my, I'll be honest, that's one of my favorite reports, kind of. It's kind of nice to see that when people hear rumors and you can like, oh, here's what's actually going on. So I'm just making sure it was just a one-off and not going to be missing in the future.
Yeah,
so.
occasionally with some staffing shortages and maternity leave, they didn't get it in this
Sure.
month. But, yeah, I miss it too, because that's one of the areas.
I love that
focus on
report, yeah.
too, so.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Any other council business? Okay, this workshop is over. Thank you all.